Good evening. The essential facts are these. President Kennedy was murdered in Dallas, Texas. He was shot by a sniper hiding in a building near his parade.
Resistance Chicks. We're your hosts, Leah and Michelle. We cannot tell you how excited we are tonight. I can't keep the smile off of my face to have with us our friend and author and historian and righteous man of God and just absolute genius. Oh, and I mentioned author of this incredible book that's like one of the fattest books I've ever read in my whole life, and I did read this book myself. I just would like to give myself some pat on the back props. Treasonous Cabal author Barry Jones in the house. Barry, welcome to the program. We're so glad that you're here.
Well, thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Leah. I appreciate the invite and excited to talk about this topic because, as we talked earlier, it is extremely relevant.
It's so relevant to right now because we were saying, okay, so you're all going to have to forgive us. My best friend, Catherine, this is her, you guys hear about her on our show all of the time. This is her Uncle Barry. When Catherine refers to Uncle Barry, she always refers to him as Uncle Barry. So I don't have any way of calling him Barry. I can only call him Uncle Barry. I am so sorry. He is not my uncle, but he is my best friend's uncle. So if I slip up, I'm going to try to use Barry because it's so professional. But if Uncle Barry comes out during the show, y'all going to have to just get over it. So Uncle Barry has given us over the years, I was going back, our first interview with him, I think was like in like 2021 or something. Yeah. And we would be around Catherine's parents' house and he would just start talking and Leah and I are just like enthralled. And of course the family's all heard it before and we're like, hang on.
We need to record
We got to record this. So we had a sit down recording. We did that. Then we had Uncle Barry on the show to talk about the link between the JFK assassination and the Watergate scandal. That was mind blowing for me, almost even more mind blowing than the first. Yeah. But what I have loved consistently is every time we've had a chance to talk to Uncle Barry, you always manage to bring it back around to why is this important to right now? And how is this connected to everything from the COVID con? You know, I was even doing some weird research a couple days ago on the polio vaccine again, which I already know most of that from Uncle Barry and from this amazing book, The Treasonous Cabal, that he has written. But all of these things that you don't think are related are related. So the long-awaited JFK files have finally been released, and we were on a live show last night, and everybody in the chat was like, JFK files, and I was like, well, so I kind of on the side, I'm getting my cell phone out, and I sent Uncle Barry an email, and I said, hey, you want to come on the show tomorrow night and talk about this? And I was hoping I would beat everybody else because Barry is a leading authority on the JFK assassination and everything related. So I knew that his docket was going to probably fill up, and he said yes, much to my very much excitement because I knew we weren't going to be able to get to it till next week. So right here, breaking news, JFK files have been released. Barry, I didn't want to ask you ahead of time. This is what I was starting out the conversation. And I wanted to, hit you with a couple of questions pre-show, and I didn't because I just want my first reaction to be what you guys see. But so initially, can you lead us up to what you were telling me earlier about your thought process going into these files and your expectations? Because we've had so many times where it's going to be released or it is, and it's all black lines and there's nothing there.
Yeah, I wasn't very optimistic. And so it really wasn't a red letter day for me. You would think that with all the work I've put into it, that I would have been chomping at the bit yesterday. Right. And I did get online, check 2 or 3 times, but the stuff, it didn't get released during the morning or the afternoon. It wasn't until the evening. And I just kind of figured, oh, here we go again. It's going to be another letdown, another excuse. And I was a little bit uh, concerned about that because President Trump had actually made the announcement the day before. Normally, it's his underlings, it's the attorney general, or it's the FBI director, or it's this person or that. And I thought, wow, Trump really stuck his neck out by saying that. And now here it is, 4 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever, and it hasn't been released yet. He's going to look pretty bad. And then, boom, here they come. And then they just continue to come. And that was my first thought was, well, we'll see. My second thought was, even if they do come, they'll probably be so heavily redacted, we won't be able to see anything of value. Or, and here's the pretzel people like me get twisted up into. You study these institutions that are so hell bent on protecting themselves.
Like the
You
CIA,
study
the
them,
FBI, the NSA.
yeah, you study them long enough, and their whole expertise is disinformation. They're experts at it. That's what they do. So if they have fought for 61 years to prevent the release of these files, either A, there's something so bad in it they don't want us to know, or B, that it's a psyop and they're creating an expectation level that can't ever be met. And they'll laugh at us as we quibble over little details that really don't matter.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really expect much. And I had a litmus test that I was, okay, this was to me. And if you're not into the research, this wouldn't mean anything to you. But if you are into the research and you know what is still out there, and this is supposed to be the last of the files or next to the last of the files, if it's legitimate, these things should be in there.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Well, you're like, I have these puzzle pieces. That's a graphics that I chose for the last time you were on the show, but I went ahead and left them this time because what you're talking about is when you do this puzzle and you're waiting, you know what pieces, like there's a hole there. Right. Is that what you're telling me? Like you knew if the piece doesn't come out to fill in that hole, then it's not legit.
Yes. I mean, I thought, well, if there's some of these pieces missing, then this whole document dump is illegitimate. They've cleansed it, they've redacted it, or they've manufactured other evidence in its place, and we're just getting this disinformation that they're so good at. Well, as I started to look at it late last night, partly because of that email you sent me, I started to check off those questions. And I got about halfway into it. Now, I haven't gone through all of them yet.
Well, there's a
but
ton.
I've gone far enough to know that this is legitimate because these topics that I've had questions about for years. We've all had questions about for years because we haven't had any evidence to study or to counter whatever the official narrative was. We had our theories, but there wasn't anything official that we could point to and say, aha, see, but now we do. And so I put them together on a little spreadsheet so I could walk you through it because this is the legitimacy test that I had. And this is what I have discovered so far in the document dump to this date or to this hour. So it's been, I mentioned this as I was talking to you before. It's really reaffirmed in my mind is sometimes you get into this and you study it for years and you talk about it at parties with people and you see their eyes glaze over and you think, I'm that guy. I'm that guy.
But
I've become that guy.
Glaze over when you told us. We were like sitting there like,
well, not everyone's like you guys. And they'll look at me like, oh, gee, don't, whatever you do. And I can just imagine scenarios where people are saying, who's this Barry guy we're going to meet? Well, whatever you do, don't bring up JFK. Whatever you do, don't bring up JFK. So sometimes you kind of want to let go of it, and then it grabs you again. And then you want to let go of it again, and then it grabs you again. You just can't wrestle free. And then you have a moment like last night and this morning when you realize, hey, I wasn't out in left field. This is what I've been saying. And I have a lot of students that have heard me over the years teach this stuff, and I don't know how many of them listened and remember all the details, but I sowed that seed. I did. I sowed that seed. And if they think about it in this moment, they'll know that I sowed that they had a teacher that sowed that seed. So it is sort of gratifying in that
Yeah.
respect to think you haven't just been wasting your time chasing, fantasies.
Well, I want
But
to hit on something real quick before we move on, because I don't know how many people who are watching right now have seen our other interviews with you, although I do have them posted on resistancechicks.com on today's show. However, you taught this in public school. Can you tell everybody about that real quick?
Yeah, well, it started off as a Watergate obsession of mine in my early years, and then as I got into Watergate and realized there were some questions that I couldn't answer, I started studying and going backwards, and it always led me back to the JFK assassination. So I start wrapping the two together and found that it's the same people. It's all connected. And so what I would do is offer, you have these standards that you have to cover, and then there's a state test at the end. So typically the schedule works beautifully for someone like me, because what happens is you cover the standards and you take the state test in April. Well, school doesn't get out till the end of May. You have a month where you have to cover, you basically are a babysitter because you're done with the class. You have no more standards to cover. Now, obviously, the principal doesn't want you to just show movies every day. So you've got to come up with something that's related to your topic, to your discipline, and keep those kids interested when they already know the state test has been given. And normally what happens is you use that time to review for the final exam or something of that nature. I would count the state test as my final. I would tell the kids, listen, if you will work hard and try hard on this state test, I will use that as your final grade, because those tests are much easier than my test anyway. So that was a win for them. And then I told them, and then after that, instead of covering new or reviewing like everybody else, we'll cover the JFK assassination and Watergate. And it got to be a tradition. In the last month, Mr. Jones is going to cover the JFK assassination. Of course, what they thought was I was just going to tell them who did it, but I would take them through all the weeds and the details. And at the end, we'd show the movie, the JFK movie by Oliver Stone and everything. And every year I would come back and I would think, well, this is the year my students will be tired of it. This is the class that won't want to hear it. I mean, we're 50 years out, and then we're 55 years out, and then we're 60 years out. Surely these people, no, they would have heard about it, because I taught juniors. So they would have heard about it from the previous year's seniors, the senior class who took me the previous year. And they would say, when are we going to do JFK? When are we going to do a JFK? Oh, wow. And so I would always have to come back to it. And my students are really what drove me on, because if it were just up to me, I would have given this up years ago.
Wow.
I have not made any money from it necessarily. It's not been, my wife, there's been nights I've been my head buried in a book or doing some internet research. I'm sure she would have preferred if I would have given her that attention instead. So I don't know what to account for, but it is, like I say, on days like this, when you realize that it hasn't been a fool's errand.
Right.
My wife tells me now, she says, I've watched you, and this has been a pursuit of yours for 30 years. She said, this is not going to go to waste. There is something that, and she's a very spiritual person. And so she says, this is God ordained.
100%.
He has put this desire in your heart, and you are I am a very scatterbrained kind of a person when it comes. I have a very short attention span. If someone is talking and I am not interested in what they are saying, I have a very difficult time even cloaking my body language in such a way to even fool them into thinking I'm still interested. She says she recognizes I start rubbing my face, my eyes, and and she says, but that's never happened with this.
That's
She
amazing.
says, I would have thought 30 years ago when you started on this, oh, this will be something for a year, 2 years maybe, and then Barry will move on. And she says, it has never happened that way. So anyway, my students, that's how I would do it. I would wait until the end of the year, and they would be clamoring for me to teach the JFK assassination. And so I'd save it for the last month after we'd finished our standards. And that's how I could get it. But, my principal, they're really, in the public school system, they're really keyed in on you teaching those standards. And so, what's interesting, Michelle and Leah, there's not one standard in the state of Tennessee where I taught for all those years about the JFK assassination.
Oh my gosh.
Not a single one. And
you think that's by design?
Probably. I mean, you can't understand the Cold War. You can't understand what's going on today if you don't understand what happened November 22, 1963. So I just invented my own standard after we got done with all the regular standards and took the state test. And I fulfilled checked all the boxes that my administrators had for me. Then it was my time.
That's awesome.
And, they would go home and tell their parents. I would get emails from parents because they were either alive during that time, they remember where they were, or their parents, and I would get queries from parents a lot from their kids, and then the kids would go home and argue with their parents. Their parents believed what the government told them, and
the magic bullet.
Yeah, and the lone gunman, all that nonsense. So the parents would contact me and say, what are you teaching my kid? What's going on? Tell me what's going on. And it would open doors to a lot of pretty interesting discussions.
That is amazing. Okay, so I do need to let everybody know, Leah's not being rude. She's over here looking at these files. And so before we get into the weeds too much, Leah, do you have any questions based on what you've been perusing here?
No, I think I want to hear what Barry has to say, because I think I want to know if you've seen things that so far that have confirmed what you believe, what you have, kind of your conclusions have come to, or, have you seen anything in there that would say, oh, I didn't get that right?
Yeah. Well, one of the first items that I was looking for had to do with Jack Ruby. And if you remember Jack Ruby, he's the one who killed Oswald 2 days after. And according to the Warren Commission, the Warren Report, Jack Ruby had no mob connections. And the only reason he killed Lee Harvey Oswald is because he was angry and he was a patriotic American and he felt sorry for Jackie. He didn't want to have to put her through a trial. And so he shot the guy that killed her husband. And that was what the Warren Commission told. That's what they put in a report. And I just, for years, not just me, everybody in the research community just scratched their head. How in the world could they miss the obvious unless it was intentional? And the obvious is that this guy was a mafia henchman. He was mobbed up. He was sent to Dallas years earlier by the Chicago mob to start nightclubs and to be their rep down in Dallas. Everybody knew this guy was mobbed up. So if he kills Oswald, that immediately implicates the mob. Immediately. And of course, they could not have Jack Ruby have any mob contacts because they were telling the world this was a lone gunman, that there were no conspirators. He acted alone. And so if you say that Jack Ruby was mobbed up, that brings the mob into it. And I always wondered, well, what do they care if it brings the mob into it? Right. But then as you get into it and you realize that the CIA and the mob were in cahoots trying to kill Castro, you realize, bringing Jack Ruby's mob contacts into it will spill over as they investigate Ruby, and the mob will spill over and touch into the CIA. So, and it furthermore, it blows apart the lone gunman theory. Well, in these documents, Jack Ruby is acknowledged to be a mafia connected guy. So we
Wow.
have a document that is diametrically opposed to the Warren report,
Wow.
saying, and these are FBI documents, these are investigative documents. So these are the people that gave the evidence to the Warren report
Oh my
commission
gosh. Wow.
that knew all along that Jack Ruby was mobbed up. And we're just now finding out about it because the documents have been held onto for this long.
Wow.
So that's a huge, huge
Cover up.
piece. Yeah.
So who's
second,
okay? I know I'm so sorry, and I do feel a little bit out of my depth here, but still, who is responsible? I don't want to jump ahead, but like, who's responsible for a cover up like that?
Well, the Warren Commission did not investigate. This is one of the misnomers that a lot of people have. They think that the Warren Commission went out with their own investigators and they investigated. They didn't. They took whatever evidence J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI gave them, and that's what they looked at.
Okay,
So the clearinghouse for all the evidence was J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI.
gotcha.
Now, in the minutes right after the assassination, Hoover was already announcing publicly, wrote a memo to this effect. The Assistant Attorney General wrote a memo to this same effect, that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. So before the investigation has even begun, they've already announced their conclusion.
Wow.
So when it comes time to give evidence to the Warren Commission about Jack Ruby, they cannot give evidence of Jack Ruby being mobbed up because that blows apart their narrative that they've been running around telling everybody. So you ask the question, who's covering it up? FBI is. J. Edgar Hoover is.
For the
And
CIA.
yes, and you'll understand that this is about relationships, it's about leverage, it's about jobs. For example, J. Edgar Hoover was always fighting for his job. John F. Kennedy wanted to, there was a law that said once you reach a certain age, you're mandatory retirement age. And he had reached that age, but he didn't want to let go of his job. Well, John F. Kennedy was going to force him out. And Hoover was best friends with guess who? Lyndon Baines Johnson.
Oh my gosh.
And so in order for him to keep his job, somehow he had to hang on until Lyndon Baines Johnson was president. One of the first official acts LBJ did was to appoint FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover for life.
Oh my gosh.
So that was, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. All of this evidence that I'm going to hide that implicates the CIA, that implicates LBJ, that implicates anybody in government that I need favors out of or I need something from, I'm going to hide that evidence and we're going to pin it all on a patsy who we're going to kill 2 days later so he can't defend himself. And then in exchange, I'm going to get appointed FBI director for life.
So so speaking of LBJ, because that's a big question that a lot of people have been asking, have you uncovered anything in the files about LBJ?
Yeah, the day before the assassination, so this would be November 21st, LBJ sent a message back to DC asking for a new set of clothing to be sent to Dallas on November 22nd. A fresh set of clothing. Now, this is a trip that has been planned for months. In fact, he had a lot to do with them going to Dallas, going to Texas. He and the governor, John Connally. And there is a document where LBJ, in this document dump, where LBJ is asking for a fresh set of clothing. This is on the 21st to be sent to Dallas. And they're not even in Dallas yet.
Wow.
To be sent to Dallas on the 22nd. And that might seem like an innocuous detail, but when you put it in context with some of the other decisions that LBJ, some of the other things that were going on during that same time period, it shows foreknowledge on the part of LBJ. There are other things that LBJ did on that day that contribute to that as well. It's just another piece. Like, for example, his best friend was John Connally. And in that morning, according to Jackie, her husband and LBJ got in a screaming fit in the hotel room,
Okay.
screaming at each other because he wanted John Connally to ride back in the cars with him, next to him, and he wanted his enemy, Ralph Yarborough, to ride in the car with JFK.
Oh my gosh.
Which he later used to call the kill car. So he wanted his enemy, plural, his enemies, plural,
Wow.
JFK and Yarborough together in the kill car with John Connally back with him, 3 or 4 cars back, safe. And Kennedy wouldn't let him. Kennedy said, no, Connally's riding with me. He's the governor of the state. That's decorum. That's how it works.
Yeah.
And LBJ stormed out. There were other things that were going on that day that when you put it all together, the screaming fit with the president, the request for a separate set of clothing on the 22nd, his actions in the car when the shots began, he basically dove for the wheel well as soon as he heard the first shot. I could go on and on. This was a piece of the puzzle that confirmed in a lot of people's mind, not just my own, immediately when we saw it, was that, see, LBJ was involved.
Wow. Maybe.
And he knew in advance he was going to need another set of clothes. And by another set of clothes, you got to think about what's fixing to happen. JFK is going to be dead, and he's going to be inaugurated, taking the oath, and a very famous picture in front of the whole world in Air Force One, standing next to Jackie.
Right.
And so
wow.
it's not by itself definitive proof of anything, but when you put it together with the rest of the context, it shows that LBJ had foreknowledge.
But clearly it was enough of a something to be in these documents.
Right. The investigators noted it, and they investigated it, and they created a document over it.
So
They just hid it because they knew what this would cause once it's released. There were some pretty strong people in the LBJ camp that didn't want this released. And his estate, after he died, didn't want these sort of things released.
Really?
So, yes. Oh, yeah.
If it's nothing,
really
then
series.
why the desire to hide it?
Yeah, the people don't realize the links to what the LBJ estate. This is his wife and his daughters and kids, whatever. There was a series that came out, and I think it was 88, 89, 90, somewhere in that. And it was called The Men Who Killed Kennedy. And it was over in Britain. And it played on the History Channel. And the title was The Men Who Killed Kennedy, implying there was a conspiracy. It was a plural. And one of the episodes was LBJ as one of the suspects. Wow. And his estate went after the History Channel, threatened a lawsuit.
Really?
And they pulled it. They pulled it from the History Channel.
Wow.
And the guy who produced all those, Nigel, I forget his last name. Anyway, you can't find it anymore.
Really?
It's disappeared to history. I can find it because I know where to look. But it's like an 8 or 9 part series. And there were other people that were named in this that didn't go after him. But the LBJ estate did. And it was powerful enough still in the late 80s to get it jerked off the air. Yeah.
So can you explain to our viewers, I know this would be a whole show in and of itself, what interest did LBJ have in having Kennedy killed?
Aside from becoming
president, yeah.
Yeah, well, that was always his ambition because it was a either or situation for LBJ. He was either going to jail or he was going to be president.
Oh, okay.
He was on the verge of being indicted by Bobby. He was going to be dropped from the ticket in '64 on a pretext that he had scandal and he was being investigated. And so JFK was going to dump him from the ticket, put a placeholder in his place so that Bobby could run in '68.
Wow.
Meanwhile, the investigation would continue, and he was crooked. There was really no saving him. In fact, on the day, this is another one of those puzzle pieces. On the very day JFK died, there was a hearing in the Senate about Bobby Baker, which was his secretary of the Senate back when he was in the Senate, and all that scandal. And the guy that was scheduled to testify that day was giving evidence to the Senate of bribes being paid to LBJ when he was president of the Senate, and including the time that he was vice president, so that these Texas military contractors like General Dynamics and Brown and Root could get these big military contracts. They were shipping $100,000 worth of cash in brown bags to Bobby Baker, and Bobby Baker was hand delivering it to LBJ.
No. So
Yeah.
that's not, is that in the new drop?
No. This is stuff that disappeared once he became president.
Okay.
See, he was being investigated, and on that day they were having a hearing, and the guy testifying was giving evidence that if JFK does not die that day, I don't know if LBJ lasts another month.
Wow.
Before he's hauled away in handcuffs. And he kept calling from his hotel that morning back to Washington, talking to his people. What's going on in that hearing? What's going on in that hearing?
Oh.
What's going on in the hearing? And 2 hours later, he's president. And all that investigation went away. Time Life magazine had a big feature story ready to go the following Monday
Wow.
on LBJ and all his corruption, and they scrapped it.
Oh my gosh.
Because he was made, because he became president on Friday. So you asked the question, why? What was his motivation? Because he knew he was going to jail.
Wow.
And his only way to stay out of jail was to become president. So he, who is now the chief law enforcement officer, and he's over the attorney general.
Wow.
He picks the FBI director. And of course, he's going to put who in as FBI director for life? His buddy, J. Edgar Hoover.
Oh my gosh.
And the attorney general was Bobby. Bobby was the one investigating him. But once John is dead, Bobby's basically neutered at that point. He pretty much shut down at that point. And within a year, he'll be gone. And now LBJ gets to pick his successor. So he had to, he didn't have any choice. It was a zero-sum game for LBJ. And of course, he came into the vice presidency already thinking this. It's interesting when his supporters argued with him, don't take the vice presidency. That's a dead-end job. Why would you do that? You hate Kennedys. Why would you work for the Kennedys? And he said, power is where power goes. He says, I've done the research. And 1 out of every 5 presidents dies in office. And we're on 7 straight that haven't died. I like my odds.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Wow.
Have you ever heard of Roger Stone?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. Roger Stone wrote probably the definitive book on LBJ. And of course, he names him as the chief suspect. And he says that of course, he was an aide to Richard Nixon. And Nixon was alive during all this time. And one night he said he was talking to Richard Nixon. And Nixon was famously closed-mouthed. He would real buttoned up. He wouldn't talk. But he says if you got a martini in him late at night, he'd loosen up a little bit and talk. So he says, I got a couple martinis in him. And I asked him, I said, and this is before he became president. He said, Mr. Nixon, what happened to John? What happened to JFK? And he said Nixon kind of looked at him and looked both ways like he was looking to see if anybody was around. And he said, well, we both wanted to be president, me and LBJ. Difference was I wasn't willing to kill for it.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So it's a long story. I did like a 5-part series on LBJ. He's the perfect person, because if you're in a conspiracy to kill the president, you better make sure that whoever is the new president has got your back. And what better way to ensure that no one in the conspiracy goes to jail that if one of the conspirators is the guy sitting in the Oval Office now.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he's the one who picked the Warren Commission.
Oh, wow.
He put, so he's the one that forced the Secret Service to kidnap basically JFK's body, bring it back to Washington to have an autopsy in DC where they could control it. So He's the perfect person. It's in his state. So he's the most powerful politician in his state. So he can control the investigation there in Texas. He's best friends with the governor. He knows the mayor of the city of Dallas, who's going to be instrumental in changing the motorcade route at the last minute.
Right.
He knows Texas is his home state.
Right.
So you have, and he's the vice president at the time, but you plan it for your home state. And then now that you're president, you now are not just you don't just have jurisdiction over Texas. Now you have jurisdiction over the entire country and all the institutions underneath you.
Right.
He's the perfect person to make sure the conspirators get away with this.
So, okay.
So, oh yeah.
So now we're talking about LBJ.
You got me off track.
No, I'm sorry. No, I love it. I love the rabbit trails. That's what you're here for. So my brain is just kind of, all my gears are going because I'm going back to, everything that I read in your book and the different times that we've spoken, and who I have, kind of pegged as the whodunit, right? And I kind of put it more on like the deep state, right? So tell me how, what do we know of the deep state as far as these new files and evidence that would be found with the FBI and the CIA?
Okay. So I'm going to give you a little quiz, see if you guys were paying attention.
Barry.
Who was giving the evidence to the Warren Commission?
LBJ. Well, the FBI was, and LBJ picked the people on the Warren Commission.
J. Edgar Hoover.
All the evidence came through the FBI.
Right.
Okay. So we've already established that we've been taught for 61 years that Jack Ruby was not in the mob.
Right.
Because that's what the Warren Commission said. In this document dump, they're acknowledging that Jack Ruby was in the mob. So for 61 years, they lied about a very key detail. But there's reason they lied about that because remember, they're telling us it's a lone gunman.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The second big lie, or the second big omission that the FBI withheld from the Warren Commission was any talk of the anti-Castro activities that were going down in Miami. Because if you acknowledge the fact that these anti-Castro Cubans, these Cuban exiles who are trying to assassinate Castro, if they're in any way, shape, form involved in this assassination, it's not just the Cubans. There is a cabal down in Miami that's working together. It's the CIA, it's the mob, it's the Cubans. They're like the Holy Trinity. The CIA uses the mob, who uses the Cubans to do all the dirty work. The CIA had their big base in Miami. This was Operation Mongoose. They had their big base on the South Campus of Miami University called JM Wave. And it was all CIA people. But then they had 5 Operation Mongoose bases, 3 of which are right on the outskirts of Miami. One's in the Everglades, one's offshore on the west, No Name Key, and one's offshore in the east. And then that's an island, or Swan Island over there. And this is where all the Cuban exiles are. And these Cuban exiles are all in Santos Traficante's mafia family, crime family. And so you have a marriage of CIA, mob, and Cubans working in Miami to assassinate Castro. And these are the ones who turned, once Kennedy betrayed them and didn't invade Cuba and didn't participate in any more wars against Cuba, they turned and they assassinated Kennedy instead. Bobby Kennedy knew immediately when J. Edgar Hoover called him on the phone and said, "Your brother's been killed." Everybody always wondered why Bobby did not pursue it like a bulldog to investigate who killed his brother. Publicly. Privately, he did. Privately, he immediately got on the phone. He called the CIA director, John McCone. He says, "I want you at my house in 5 minutes. Get over here." He then got on the phone. He called his private investigator and sent him to Chicago to start looking at mafia his mafia contacts, that he knew, because no one had done more investigating of the mob than Bobby Kennedy at this point. So he knew all the players. And then his third act was to pick up the phone and call Harry Ruiz. It was like Harry Enrique Ruiz Williams or some long name down in Miami, who was the leader and his contact, all the Cuban population down there. And he says, I think one of your guys did it.
Wow.
Now, I'm going to try to explain this so it's very simple to understand. Just follow me real quick. Bobby had been put in charge of Operation Mongoose by his brother after Bay of Pigs. When Bay of Pigs failed spectacularly, he said, okay, next time, I'm not trusting the CIA to do this. Bobby, you're in charge. He only trusted his brother. And he says, you get it done. We got to get Castro out of there. You get it done. So Bobby was working with this cabal down in Miami, the CIA, the Cubans, and the mob to try to overthrow Castro. And when he called Harry Enrique Williams and said, I think one of your guys did it, he might as well have been saying, I think one of our guys did it.
Wow.
Because Bobby was in charge of Operation Mongoose. And one of the reasons Bobby accepted the Warren report for several years and publicly made no effort to investigate his brother's death is because he didn't want to find out what he knew he was going to find out, which was that his Operation Mongoose that he had been over turned and killed his own brother.
Wow.
And by extension, this is one of the reasons why he went through, he pretty much shut down for about a year. He felt so guilty.
Wow.
So anyway, I'm going back to my original point. The reason the FBI did not share with the Warren Commission any information about the anti-Castro activities in Miami, even though they knew. And the document proves that they knew. Because it's not just one document. It is tens and hundreds of documents about Operation Mongoose, which says to me that the investigators knew that this was somehow involved. Why waste your time investigating this cabal down in Miami and Operation Mongoose about the JFK assassination unless you know that there's a connection? They hid this from the Warren Commission, which then turned around and wrote a report saying, well, it was Lee Harvey Oswald. He acted alone for a couple of reasons. Number one, it destroys the lone gunman theory. You now have, in the first two documents that I have found, the very first two ones, you have three suspects. You have the mob, you have the CIA, and you have the Cubans. All of that was hidden from the Warren Commission. Jack Ruby's connections to the mob, the Miami stuff, the anti-Castro, is all hidden from the Warren Commission.
So is this stuff that came out in the new documents? So this is new.
This is new.
This was happening.
We have always suspected this,
right,
Michelle? We've always suspected this, but we never had documentary, support for that. We now do. That the investigators knew that Jack Ruby was mobbed up, and they knew that this Miami cabal that was trying to get Castro flipped and went after Kennedy instead because Kennedy wouldn't let him go after Castro. And so they felt betrayed, and that's a whole nother story. But it is backed up and corroborated by Bobby's first three phone calls after he got the news of his brother's death. Bobby knew within 5 minutes who killed his brother. And he also knew who didn't kill his brother because he knew who Lee Harvey Oswald was.
Wow.
Right.
And that's another long story. He had basically, in exchange for allowing him to come back from Russia into the country, you have to be an informer for me, for the FBI. And so Lee Harvey Oswald, to the day he died, was an FBI informant. And so when J. Edgar Hoover comes to him and says, hey, your brother was killed by a lone gunman. His name is Lee Harvey Oswald. Bobby's like, well, I know who, he didn't say this, but he knew who Lee Harvey Oswald was. And the reason he had told him he had to be an FBI informant is because they couldn't get any news out of the CIA. And he knew everything that the CIA was doing, they were hiding from the White House. And he and his brother didn't know what the CIA was up to. And so now here's his opportunity to have a guy on the inside who is in the CIA to report back to him what the CIA is up to. And that's what Oswald did since he came back from Russia. He reported back to the White House or to Bobby or whatever channel they set up all the stuff that the CIA was up to. He was an informant. So when J. Edgar Hoover says Oswald did it, Bobby's thinking, well, if he did, that means the CIA did it.
Wow.
And and then he didn't pursue the Oswald angle. He pursued the mob. He pursued the Cubans. He pursued the CIA.
Oh,
That's who
wow.
he went. And 1 week before Bobby died in '68, he's running for president. He's out in California. He's about ready to win the California primary. And he's talking to a reporter, and the reporter asks him about the Warren Commission and if he intended to reopen the investigation into his brother's death. And Bobby said, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
See, what Bobby knew was without the president, without his brother being in the Oval Office, he didn't have the cover in '63. He didn't have the support to go do a proper investigation. So he bided his time. And he said, when I'm president, I can do it the way I want to do it. I know who to ask. I know
Right.
where the bodies are buried. So, then a week later, he's dead.
Right.
And it was right after he said that.
So I've
So
got
there are,
go ahead.
oh, go ahead, Leah.
Well, to your point about Jack Ruby, there's one document that keeps going around that I'm sure you've seen from it's the British ambassador. And it seems like somebody knew beforehand. And I'm just going to read this. This is this is Sergei. Well, it says a Russian ambassador, but its copy says British ambassador to the Russian ambassador embassy of the USSR. And this is Sergei. How would you say that? Cernog? I don't know how to say it, but he says, Mr. Wesliev, consul, gave me order to transmit this information to the U.S. government on August 9th, 1963, in Sofia, Bulgaria. Mr. Waslev, consul of the embassy of the USSR, gave me this information. So I guess it is from the British ambassador. I'm trying to follow where this is all from. Maybe you can figure this one out. I should send it to you. Gave me this information about Lee Harvey Oswald on August 14th, 1963. Mrs. How would you say that word?
Just skip the
Vanera. Okay.
pronunciation.
Girlfriend of the Russian consul came to my room and repeated that Mr. Lee Harvey Oswald is assassin. He will kill President Kennedy. On August 15th, 1963, in Sofia, Bulgaria, at the airport in the embassy car, I told to Mr. Blackshire, that's how he writes it, it's bad English, American Vice Consul, that Mr. Lee Harvey Oswald is assassin. He has a weapon or has ordered one. Mr. Blackshire said, it seems like he will kill someone. I said that Mr. Lee Harvey Oswald is preparing to kill President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. Mr. Blackshire said, where will it happen? I said they, right wing, will invite President, criticize him in the newspaper, and then kill him. Mr. Blackshire told me he will give the telegram to Department of State and give me the address where to report. At 9 a.m. on August 19th, 1963, in Washington, D.C., I went to see Mr. Kippingen, director of the Special Counselor Service Department of State at Pennsylvania Avenue. I told the director that I had information about President Kennedy. The director said, do not mention name of President Kennedy, only respond to the questions. The director said, tell us what will happen to Mr. Lee Harvey Oswald then. I said, Mr. Lee Harvey Oswald will be killed after they kill Kennedy. I said, I will take the truth drug to tell the truth. Director, tell us who else get killed in the country. I said, as I heard, that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. will be killed. Who will kill Dr. King Jr., the Negro leader? I said, a man who is in prison at the time. And so this is from Sergei Cernoch. I don't know how to say that. Czornonoh. And that is supposedly that somebody gave a tip off from Russia that Lee Harvey Oswald was going to kill the president.
But you said it was from the British ambassador.
You want to hear the story?
Yeah.
Okay. The guy's name is Richard Case Nagel. Richard Case Nagel was a double agent for the CIA So he worked for the CIA, but he also worked for the KGB. He was a counterintelligence officer. He had served in Japan with Lee Harvey Oswald. They had become friends. Lee Harvey Oswald was also a counterintelligence officer, which is why he went to Russia pretending to be a defector, but he was really working for the CIA. Right. Anyway, the Russians always suspected that Oswald was a fake defector. They couldn't prove it. And the information that he gave him, or gave the Russians, was such a I don't know, it was such a hit for the KGB. It led to the downing of that U-2 plane, the spy plane, Dennis Powers. And that plane had been flying over Russia for years unmolested. It frustrated them to no end. They couldn't get that plane. And the information that he gave him, because he worked with that plane over in Russia or in Japan, he was worked with all the radar, et cetera, et cetera. So he gave them all the radar secrets, et cetera, and they were able to shoot that thing down. So they let him stay. Mm-hmm. But they always still suspected that he was a double dealer, that he was a fake defector. And they said, well, if he goes home, we'll know that he was. Right. Because there's no way during the Cold War, after he turned over state secrets to us, that the Americans are going to let him back. They'll charge him with treason. Yeah. Well, of course, not only did we let him back, we paid for his trip back. And so at that point, the Russians know, the guy's a fake defector, just like we thought. So they got their agent, Marina, and they arranged a marriage between Marina and Lee and sent Lee back married to one of their spies. Okay. And so from that point, this is why the Warren Commission didn't want to touch the Marina angle with a 10-foot pole, because they knew where that was going to lead. Now, back to Richard Case Nagel. When Oswald came back to America, the Russians said, we're going to keep tabs of this Lee Harvey Oswald. And so they're thinking that Richard Case Nagel works for them. Richard Case Nagel really worked for the CIA, but he was a double agent. So his assignment for the KGB was to follow Oswald around and report back to the Soviets what was going on. And they're friends. Nagel and Oswald are friends. They worked together at the same, in Japan. They were in the same counterintelligence outfit. So it was a very easy assignment for Richard Case Nagel. And the summer of 63, actually, before we get to the summer, it's about the spring of 63. He goes to he's following Oswald around, and Oswald is in New Orleans by this time, and he has infiltrated Alpha 66. Alpha 66 is one of these anti-Castro groups, these Cubans, and it's sponsored by the CIA. Remember, it's that same cabal. Right. And Oswald is constantly in the company of these two, what he calls Latins. One's name is Leopoldo, another name is Angel. And Oswald thinks that he is helping Leopoldo and Angel arrange for the eventual assassination of Castro. But Richard Case Nagel figures it out. He reports back to the KGB, hey, he's being set up. Oswald is being set up. My buddy didn't even realize it, but he's being set up by Leopoldo and Angel. They're going to assassinate Kennedy. Wow. And because he just left Russia, and because he's been in charge of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, and he's been on TV handing out leaflets in New Orleans for pro-Castro leaflets, they're going to blame Cuba and Russia. This is a false flag. They're going to make him the patsy. They're going to announce to the American people, a pro-Castro communist or Marxist, this guy who went to Russia, did it. And it's going to lead to a war. So the KGB ordered their agent, Richard Case Nagel, to tell Oswald what's fixing to happen. And they said, if he doesn't believe you, you have to take him to Mexico City and kill him. We cannot allow this plot to go through and us be blamed. It'll lead to a nuclear war. So he goes to Oswald, he tells him, Oswald does not believe him. So Richard Case Nagel sits down and he writes a letter to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, and he tells him everything I just told you. I've got the document in my PowerPoint that I teach. And never hears anything back. Then he informs his bosses at the CIA that Oswald is involved in a plot to kill the president. He's very careful not to say that he's figured out that he's being set up to be the patsy, because he realizes since Alpha 66 is running this whole thing, that's the CIA. And if he tells his CIA bosses that he's on to him and he knows he's being set up, he figures he'll be killed. So he just tells them, hey, I know that Oswald's going to kill the president. Nothing happens. So Nagel's like, what do I do? If I do what the KGB tells me to do and I kill him, that's murder. If I do nothing and the plot continues, I've committed treason because the president will die. I am between a rock and a hard place. I either commit murder or treason.
Oh my gosh.
He goes down to a bank in El Paso, Texas, and he goes in with a pistol and he shoots the bank, the ceiling in the bank. He goes out to the parking lot, sits in his car, and he waits for the police to come. The police come and they arrest him and they ask him, why did you do this? And he says, because I don't want to commit murder or treason.
Oh
and of course,
gosh.
they have no idea what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, a letter arrives at the Russian embassy in Washington, D.C. And the letter says it's ostensibly from Oswald. It's typed. And the Russian embassy is immediately suspicious because when they dealt with Oswald, and they got a lot of written communication from Oswald from his 3 years or 2 years in Russia, it was always handwritten.
Oh, wow.
But this one is typed. And in the letter, he talks about how he's meeting with these Russian specialists about assassinations, and he's trying to get travel visas so that he can leave the country after the November. Like he's trying to arrange the assassination and arrange his getaway afterwards. This letter comes to the Russian embassy, and they know now what Richard Case Nagel has told, and they realize this is a setup because the FBI is getting this same letter at the same time we're getting it because they intercept all our mail, and they're going to release this letter, and they're going to use this as proof that Oswald is the guy. Wow. So they send the letter back to the American government, says, we refuse this letter. We know what this is. It's a forgery. It's a fake. It's all in an effort to set up this guy in the assassination plot against. This happened 2 days after the assassination. Wow. The FBI was preparing to release that letter, and they couldn't because the KGB called them on it and said, we know what you've been doing.
No
and the
way.
reason they knew what they've been doing is because of their double agent, Richard Case Nagel, who told them. So when the document dump yesterday reveals that the KGB knew in advance, had foreknowledge of an assassination plot against JFK, it corroborates the Richard Case Nagel story, which people, he went to jail for that attempted robbery. He wasn't trying to rob anybody. He went to jail. And now he was trying to create an alibi for himself. Whenever it goes down, at least I won't be involved. I'll be in El Paso in a prison cell.
That's genius.
Which is exactly what happened. So in the years after, it took him a long time to get the nerve to tell this story, but no one would pay him any heed because he was an ex-con.
Wow.
He was discredited, right? Well, so for a lot of people, they dismiss the Richard Case Nagel story, and you never hear about the Soviets having foreknowledge of the JFK assassination because that would buttress the case that Richard Case Nagel was telling the truth. But now in this document dump, when you see that the KGB did know, it's corroboration of Richard Case Nagel's story.
Now, you had told us about Richard Case Nagel. So this is one of those things that this is along the Uncle Barry theory train, that it's just another feather in the cap of I was right. Am I following?
Well, it's just, see, what happens is when you get these pieces of evidence from these people, these witnesses, one of the most effective ways to discredit a witness or to silence a witness is to discredit them.
Right.
And you find yourself, when you formalize these theories about what happened and you're supporting it with some of these discredited witnesses, people who know who these folks are say, well, you can't rely on that.
Yeah.
You can't take their word for it. So when you get a puzzle piece like this, it's like, aha, because this is 61 years they knew that the KGB knew. 61 years. Of course, they knew it 2 days after because the KGB called them on it.
Wow.
But it took us 61 years to get corroboration for Richard Case Nagel. And, you know, it's interesting. You look at these witnesses, what often happens. Years went by, and an author named Dick Russell, who was a researcher, found Richard Case Nagel, had heard the story and searched, finally found him, interviewed him, and wrote a book about it. The book's called The Spy Who Knew Too Much.
Oh, wow.
It's a very famous book.
Yeah.
Well, after Oliver Stone's movie came out in 91, Congress passed a law saying that these documents that have been hidden all these years need to be released. And it's taken that long. That law was passed in 91. Here we are in 2025. It's taken 36 years or 34 years, whatever. So the AARB, which was the agency in charge of getting these documents, interviewed Dick Russell. And they said, where did you get this information? We read your book. Where did you get this? He says, well, Richard Case Nagel. Where is he? Would he talk? Does he have any documents? He has everything. He says, I went through it. He has everything. Well, would he be interested in testifying to us? He said, well, if someone would finally take him seriously, he probably would. He's an old man now. So they sat down and they wrote him a letter, sent him a letter requesting that he come to Washington, testify, and bring all his documents with him. The next day after he got that letter, he was found dead in his house.
Stop it.
You found the book?
No, for me.
This is the discrediting worked for 30 years with Richard Case Nagel. And eventually they had to resort to what they did in a lot of cases, which is to kill him. Okay. When he became a threat, because he was going to go before the AARB and tell him and give him all the documents and tell him what he knew. So he died with the documents, and they thought all of his evidence died with him. But here we find, this is one of the reasons why they didn't release these documents for all these years, because there's enough. I've gotten about halfway through, and there's more to come.
Oh, is there?
Yes. So what they know is that researchers who've been paying attention and putting it and compiling all these puzzle pieces will be able to slot these in the right places. A regular guy off the street might not mean anything because there's no like smoking gun. He did it or he whatever.
Yeah, sure.
But they know that there's enough there that proves that they've been withholding evidence that counters their narrative that they've been shoving down our throat for 61 years. Yeah. And so Richard Case Nagel's story is true. Now, what's the importance of Richard Case Nagel, other than the fact that the Russians knew in advance? And, he makes a great point. The Russians didn't want the assassination to happen.
No.
They had, because it was going to be blamed on them.
Right.
So, but other than the fact that the Russians knew in advance, what's important about Richard Case Nagel is that he had been following Oswald around, and Oswald had infiltrated Alpha 66, which was a CIA front, an anti-Castro organization filled with mob and Cubans, that same three-headed monster out of Miami that I told you about. He had infiltrated it, and he was and there was a plot within there to kill the president. That's what Richard Case Nagel said. So if Richard Case Nagel is now proven finally to be true, what he said was true, then that means Oswald was who he said he was. He was a counterintelligence agent who had infiltrated. He'd been instructed to infiltrate Alpha 66, which was a CIA organization. Okay, that's who paid the bills, and it was that CIA organization that was plotting to kill the president and plotting to set Oswald up to be the patsy, which is exactly what happened. So. Again, it's not just one piece; it's several pieces. By the way, the Russians weren't the only ones who had foreknowledge. Castro had foreknowledge, and that's another thing that came out in his document dump, that the Cuban government had foreknowledge, and the reason they had foreknowledge is because Castro had a spy organization called WASP down in Miami, He knew that the CIA was trying to kill him, and it was full of Cubans. A lot of them he knew. A lot of them he sent there to be spies, worked for him. And that's one of the reasons why we tried how many ever times, 400 some odd times to kill Castro, never could, because the spies would report to Castro, hey, they're coming for you. Bay of Pigs is going to happen on April 17th. Nothing ever succeeded because his spy network was so good, but it was in Miami. Now, what's the importance of Castro knowing that there's an assassination plot to kill Kennedy in Dallas? It's that the plot is happening in Miami. It's that same three-headed monster. He doesn't have a spy network in Dallas. He doesn't have a spy network in New Orleans. No. His spy network is in Miami. That tells you where the plot's happening. The only reason he knew, he had foreknowledge, is because his spies had their ear to the ground, and the folks that were plotting to kill Kennedy were coming from Miami. Who was that? The CIA, the mob, and the Cubans. And so they report back. So yeah, Castro knew. Yes, he had foreknowledge. Now, did he know it was going to succeed? Back in those days, there were assassination plots every Tuesday. Yeah. So it's like, but this one happened to succeed. And yes, he knew. And the reason he knew is because it came out of Miami, and that's where his spy network was. By the way, people all around the world knew. There was a barber in Madrid who had a customer who told him Kennedy was going to die exactly the way he died.
Oh, wow.
He came out years later and said, Madrid, that's Spain. So, and the word had gotten out. When I was at Dealey Plaza here recently in November, I was just placing all the different people that were standing around watching in Dealey Plaza as the assassination happened. And a bunch of them are these very sketchy characters that have history of being hitmen. And it was like a convention of hitmen.
Wow.
And what had happened, it circulated by word of mouth that this is where it was going down. And so these people who had nothing to do with it, they were just there watching. But it's like the Super Bowl. When two teams make it to the Super Bowl, I promise you, everyone in the NFL, all the coaches from every team, a lot of the players from all the different teams, all the management, it's a big convention of all the NFL people. They all go.
They all go.
Even if it's not their team playing. They all want to be there when history is made. So Dallas was like a convention of all the hitmen, all these shady characters, because word had gotten out all around the world that this was going down.
Oh, my gosh.
Have you heard of a guy, the CIA agent named Gary Underhill?
Yeah, I was going to talk about him next.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you tell me, because you're the ones reading it.
I just had
That's a stinker.
I just had this
I know what she's
file up
doing.
on air that
She's like one of my I've had students like Leah my whole life. They're always trying to trip me up.
I am not that student.
They're always trying to trip me up.
Your students weren't. Their role wasn't to interview as.
Oh no.
She's that way anyway.
Leah. Once technology came into the classroom, these kids had phones or they had their computers. They're checking up everything you say. They're like back there. If you get a word wrong, they're like, excuse me, So go ahead, Leah. Read me what's in front of you.
Okay. It says, according to a file this is a new file released.
Yeah. That's all we're talking about. Yeah.
Okay. He left Washington in a hurry late in the evening. He showed up at the home of friends in New Jersey. He was very agitated, this document. I do have a question on, these are obviously just memories written down.
Well, no, interviews at the time. They did investigate.
I know, but
Leah, it works like this, Leah. So probably his friend called an FBI agent, said, hey, my buddy, this is right after the assassination. Okay. My buddy said something interesting. I don't know if it means anything. They're getting all these tips.
Okay.
So then the agents go and they interview the parties, and then they compile a report. That's the document. Okay. So this is based on their interviews and their recollection of what was said, et cetera.
It would have been immediate. Like, I mean, there's not memories. Right. It's like within like a couple weeks, I'm assuming, right?
He says, It says that he was very agitated. He showed up with a group of friends, and it was a small clique within he says a small clique within the CIA was responsible for the JFK assassination. Gary Underhill, confided, and he was very afraid for his life and would probably have to leave the country
Yeah, and 6 months later, he was dead.
by
You
suicide.
forgot that part.
He
Oh,
was
yeah.
Clintoned.
I have a bridge I'd love to sell you, Leah. The suicide stuff. Yeah.
By
He
suicide,
was
from what I
killed.
understand, the back of the left ear. And
Now, he was killed on the
right-handed.
left side of his head, and he was right-handed. It's like
That's so hard.
it's like all those. Yeah, so he went like this. So it's like all these people that killed themselves, suicide around LBJ, shot themselves with a bolt-action rifle 3 times.
That's not funny to laugh at something like
They
that.
ruled it suicide. Bolt-action rifle 3 times. Suicide. All right. So anyway, this guy's name is Gary Underhill, and he was high up he was at what they called an unpeople. That was the term. I'd never heard that term before. He was an unpeople, which means he performs special assignments for the CIA. That's his test. So he was one of these off the books covert operators.
Oh, really?
And so, oh yeah. So this isn't just some Joe the plumber who got home from work one day. This is an inside guy. This is Gary Underhill. He's a CIA special assignments unpeople. I'm not sure where they got that word, but anyway,
Isn't that like a way, like if you're not a person
you don't
anymore, you've been
exist.
killed? Like
You don't exist.
Yeah, you're.
They've probably given him a fake identity and all. He's so far on deep background. You and I could run into him at the supermarket, and we wouldn't even know he was there. Anyway, you told the story. He traveled from Washington, D.C. to New Jersey. He tells his friends he's really upset. And he tells his friends that, quote, a small clique within the CIA was responsible for the assassination. And he was worried for his life. And then 6 months later, which is what? December, January, February, March, about June, May, or, he's dead. And they ruled it a suicide. Asher Barnes found him. He's one of his friends. He wrote for the New Republic. He said it was very suspicious because he was shot with his left hand to the left temple, and he was right-handed. So if you have, I did a bunch of episodes on all the suspicious deaths. That one I just told you about, the bolt-action rifle, is not even close to being the most amazing or most unrealistic one. That all got ruled suicides. Mm-hmm. So this is just one of many. So this shows that they had evidence back in 61 years ago that at least warranted a closer look at the CIA as to whether or not they were involved. But of course, LBJ has picked the Warren Commission, and guess who's running the Warren Commission? Alan freaking Dulles. Alan Dulles is the former head of the CIA. He's not going to allow it. That's why he was put in that position. And of course, J. Edgar Hoover's not going to let any of this go through anyway. So they have this commission, which is really just a whitewash. It's really a way to preserve the setup. And this evidence just remains locked away for 61 years. Just like the Jack Ruby was mobbed up, which we were lied to and said he wasn't. Just like all the Miami cabal, the anti-Castro folks down there, the CIA, the mob, and the Cubans that turned and eventually killed Kennedy, and we have proof of that in many different ways. They kept all that from the Warren Commission. This, I don't know if it was kept from the Warren Commission or not. It never made it into the Warren report, so I'm guessing that it was. But all this time, this evidence is sitting there for 61 years, and people like me are saying that we don't have the document to prove it, but we're saying we believe the CIA was involved, and they know that the CIA it's at least a credible theory.
Yeah.
Because one of their own said so. And they laugh us off and call us conspiracy theorists.
So I want to read a couple of comments before we get too far, and they get lost in the thing.
Okay.
So now one of these is a series of questions from one of our viewers named Jim. I don't actually want to get to this yet, but I'm going to read them so that we can file them away. He says, So the CIA had to kill Bobby in 1960. These are a series of comments. 68. How many different bullets hit Kennedy? What directions did they come from? And how many shots in all were taken at him? I don't want to go there yet, but I'm reading them so that we can file that away for later. Sherry asks, all the papers were released. My understanding is that they're not all released. And are they going to release more?
Yes. I mean, it depends on what source you listen to, because I'm finding out today, like there's some documents with Department of Defense, DOD, that, again, I'm quoting Roger Stone on this one, who said there's thousands more in the Department of Defense that need to be released. And I had always heard the figure 80,000.
Right.
Which last night, how many got released last night?
I don't know how many.
It's like 1,200.
Okay. Oh, wow.
So there's more to come. Now, I don't know what the schedule and all that's going to be, or how, whether that means the rest of them are going to be redacted and we're not going to get I don't know. I don't know. I just know there's more.
Okay.
And there's more for me personally, because I haven't gone through all these yet.
Yeah. Wow.
So anyway.
Okay. Let me keep going. Liquor Giant says.
And by the way, the FBI just announced 2 weeks ago that they found thousands of more documents related to the JFK assassination that they didn't know they even had.
Oh my.
And that's a completely separate tranche.
Wow. So that's not included in the supposed.
That's
80,000.
not included in these, because they haven't even gone through to determine classification, all that kind of stuff yet. So no, I think there's documents spread all over. I think that's one of the ways that they hide them.
Oh, wow.
You've got, well, how many agencies do they got in Washington, and how many buildings? And so you just, and then there's more than one national security. You got the CIA has theirs, the FBI has theirs. I'm sure NSA has theirs. Secret Service, we never got any Secret Service documents. They destroyed them. All these agencies have, so we're not getting everything.
That's what Roger Stone, I guess, said on the Matt Gaetz now is a podcaster.
Yeah.
But I guess Roger Stone said that he wants to put more pressure on Trump. There are additional sensitive documents at the Defense Department, the State Department, the FBI, the CIA, and the IRS.
The IRS?
Yeah, crazy.
Yes. Believe it or not, yes. Because the money trail is how you get to the bottom of a lot of these crimes.
That's a good point.
Yes.
Good.
I didn't expect, just to be honest, it's not that I didn't expect for things to come, but that we're talking about the CIA. Like, Mike Pompeo was put in as a handler for Trump. He ran the CIA. He joked on stage with a really slick grin. He's your everybody's, uncle, basically. He's a big teddy bear that you wouldn't think. He's just a nice guy. You'd show up at church and you'd shake his hand and think that's a good guy, right? But then he laughs with that very genuine smile that he has, and he says, "I lie for a living." Yeah. And they've had as much as we're like, hey, they've 60 years, it's time to release them. Have they not had that much time? What kind of good CIA are you that you don't know how to hide your own documents that show that you did things?
That's a good point. So Liquor Giant says there were plots in Chicago, Miami, and Dallas. You had told me that earlier, so I'm going to fire all these at you, and you can hit what you want. It was an NSA analyst trained in media set theory. CIA formed around Nazi groups so that is where to look. NATO-run Nazi stay-behind networks. A NOC, or not otherwise covered, CIA equals CIA denies you work for them. Let's see.
By the way, that first plot that I told you about that Richard K. Snagel uncovered, that was Washington, D.C. Originally, he was going to be killed in D.C. Then you have the Chicago plot, November 2. Then you have the Miami plots, which was 2 of them, on November 18th. Then you have the Tampa plot, and then you have Dallas.
Okay, so Liquor says, my guess is 3 shooters. They tried to make it sound like 1 shooter, so they synchronized volleys, so probably 9 shots. He says, Dulles Brothers firm Sullivan Cromwell represented Wall Street
Yeah,
in purchase
yeah.
of German businesses after World War I, then worked to recover profits after World War II. So those are comments just from Rumble. Anything that stands out in those comments that you want to address, Barry?
Well, the Sullivan and Cromwell thing, that was the sort of the deep state trying to organize the world after World War One. Allen Dulles was and his brother, they were both involved in that as attorneys. And Operation Paperclip, which we brought all those Nazi scientists back to America, the doctors, the generals, the guys who were in charge of the rocket programs. They basically ran NASA for us, and they taught us a lot of things. They taught us MK Ultra. MK Ultra stands for mind control. It's spelled with a K. That's because that's how the Germans spelled it. They used
Wow.
they used
Oh,
concentration camp victims to do all their testing on.
that's
They
sick.
came, we brought all those doctors back and they taught it to us. We just kept the same name.
Oh my
We
gosh.
didn't have concentration camp victims to do our testing on, so we
Wow.
used
We kept the
uh,
K. Oh,
mind control. So we used as our test subject, we use military personnel. We use uh, veterans in Korea during the Korean War. We used Korean POWs. We used Vietnamese. That was what Operation Phoenix was all about. And then later we came back and we used unsuspecting people in mental hospitals here at home or in universities. Some of the most famous victims who got caught up in MK Ultra went on to become notorious criminals because we broke their brains. One of them was the Unabomber. He was
right.
one of the young. He was the youngest student in the history of Harvard. He was brilliant.
Really?
He's like 14 or 15 when he was a freshman at
No
Harvard.
way. How come I've never heard that?
Well,
Wow.
I'm Michelle because you live in Ohio.
We lived in Oklahoma. Like, we've been around where a lot of these
No,
things have
history
happened.
stops at the border of Ohio. You don't know anything.
Apparently.
No, so anyway, they would get these young kids, these unsuspecting ones. Another one was Whitey Bulger, who became the notorious mob thug out in Boston. Another one was Jack Ruby. Uh, that's a story. Sirhan, the one who was alleged to have killed RFK. I could go on. Charles Manson. These are all victims
That
of
one I
MK Ultra.
know about.
And the whole program of MK Ultra, which again we got from the Germans, was to program people to be like automatons, whereby through LSD and hypnosis, we could program them to commit crimes and have no memory of it afterwards. And then the next level of it was to program them to program others. That's where Charles Manson took it. He had a family and he was hypnotized and directed and programmed by the CIA. And then he got these girls under his sway, not just girls, some of them were full grown men. And then he ordered them. He had them hopped up on LSD and he ordered them to commit all those murders. And it was all designed to create this hysteria because these folks were on the loose killing prominent white people, like actors and actresses out in LA, Sharon Tate, et cetera, et cetera. And they were writing on the walls that this was, they're saying pig and race war. And so it was all an effort to try to discredit the Black Panthers and the civil rights movement so that the government would have an excuse to crack down on these civil rights activists. It was a pretty devious. And then in the 70s in the church hearings, when we found out about MK Ultra, they went and destroyed all their documents. We only have a few documents remaining in the test, but they've actually had lawsuits from the families who had sent their daughter away to college or their son away to college and ended up becoming a victim. So they sued the government and the government had to settle. They weren't found guilty. They had to settle. They even killed one of their own. They killed one of their doctors, one of the guys who was in charge of the program, Dr. Olson. they pushed him off a tall building in New York City because he was threatening to go public with it. Yeah, I mean, that's another rat hole. Has nothing to do with the JFK assassination other than the Jack Ruby angle. Jack Ruby was after the assassination. Warren Commission was scheduled to go down to Dallas, talk to Jack Ruby, get his testimony. Before they went down there, Alan Dulles picked up the phone. He called his doctor, his MK Ultra doctor, Jolly West. Jolly West went to this jail, interviewed Jack Ruby by himself. There were no cameras, no recording devices, no guards. That should sound familiar. And Jack Ruby had a psychotic break with reality whereby he was crawling underneath the tables and he was scratching his eyes. He was banging his head against the wall so hard he was bad. His brains were leaking out. And Jolly West comes out and announces to the press that Jack Ruby has had a psychotic break with reality. He had just formalized a paper he had turned in saying that he had just figured out how to cause mental insanity, a temporary state of mental insanity in a patient that would later revert back. But you could temporarily make somebody insane. There's a paper on file that he wrote, he authored, stating that he had finally figured out how to do that. It was right after that he was assigned to go talk to Jack Ruby, so that when the Warren Commission goes down and interviews Jack Ruby, he's just a babbling idiot, doesn't say anything worth anything. And so they immediately put in the Warren report and announced to the American people that Jack Ruby has no information of any value.
Wow. So that's a pretty big, you're like, there's no connection other than this.
Well, that's a pretty big connection. You're right. And, it's interesting. The same thing ends up happening to him. It happened to Richard Case Nagel because, remember Richard Case Nagel was discredited. And for 30 years, that was enough. But when the AARB said, bring us your documents, come talk to us, they eventually had to kill him. Same thing happened with Jack Ruby. When the Warren Commission went to talk to him, they sent Jolly West. He becomes this babbling idiot. The Warren report comes out, nothing from Jack Ruby, right? Well, then the Texas appeals court throws out his conviction and says, we're going to retry you, but this time you have to talk. You didn't talk last time, but you got to talk this time. The insanity has passed now. So now they realize, he's going to get a new trial. This time he's going to talk. 28 days later, he dies of cancer. Oh my God. 28 days later.
And then in there, you talk about the cancer gun.
He'd never been diagnosed with cancer before. He all of a sudden gets diagnosed, and 28 days later, he dies of cancer. Michelle, that should ring a bell in your head. No, if you read my book, that should ring a bell.
No, it totally does. Because like Leah just brought up with the cancer gun. I'm going to be honest. We are on YouTube here, but I'm still going to say it. We are seeing a lot of people that have had
don't say the word out
loud. The thing. Everybody knows what I want to say. Yeah. They've had the thing. And they're all getting these rapid growth cancers. Yeah, well, and every time I hear about that from people like literally that I literally know, and I'm hearing like, oh wow, you got this rapid growth cancer, and some people are open to what I think, and some people are not. But I always go back to the cancer gun, and I'm like, I feel like what they did to us, which I'm being careful to say what I'm saying, whatever. But I feel like what they did to us, the very inception of it was all the way back, in the 60s.
Yeah. This is nothing new, right? It's nothing new. So anyway, we really went on a rabbit trail there, but that's the connection of MK Ultra to JFK is what happened to Ruby.
So, okay, I want to hit this. Now we can move on to this next thing because Leah, it's the same thing that you got up. Student.
Well, then can I ask it?
No, because I want to read the person's comment first, and then you can ask.
Okay.
Ziggy says, Bush Sr. was involved. Now you may say what you want to say.
Okay, so Roger Stone tweets out, indisputable, for 30 years, President George H.W. Bush insisted that he could not remember where he was. Everybody knows what happened on 9/11, and I'm sure that everybody.
My mom can remember where she was. She was like,
who was an adult, knew exactly
2 or 3
where they
years
were.
old.
So Bush Sr. says he didn't know where he was the day JFK was shot, but in fact he was in Dallas, Texas, and in the morning, and Tyler, Texas, at lunchtime, returning to Dallas in the evening. Bush called the FBI office in Houston minutes after JFK's murder to establish an alibi. And then another comment says, George H.W. Bush also conveniently denied any involvement in intelligence prior to his appointment as the director of the CIA by unelected President Gerald Ford, who was installed after the Watergate silent coup and who led the Warren Commission cover-up on the JFK assassination, and together with the chief of staff, Dick Cheney,
Love that guy,
interfered in the Rockefeller Commission's investigations of CIA assassins. So what say you on
HW
Bush there?
Well, HW was in Dallas that morning. Then he, think about it just for a second. What are the odds that 4 U.S. presidents would be in Dallas on the day JFK dies? You got JFK in the front of the motorcade. You got LBJ coming up in the back. Nixon was there that morning at a Pepsi-Cola conference.
Wow.
And George W. Bush was there that morning before he went on to Tyler.
Wow.
I told you it was Grand Central Station.
Okay, so
anyway,
all of these presidents know. Like, I am convinced that every president from that moment has known.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Richard Nixon
Except
had a
for Trump,
meeting.
he doesn't seem to let on to any of that.
No, Trump knows more than everybody. He just doesn't care. And he because listen, what happened to JFK was a message. And it almost happened to Trump.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to a sniper on YouTube, and he was talking about you don't necessarily look to take headshots. A headshot is an arrogant shot. A headshot is a message shot. You go for the kill. So you go for the mass, the body mass.
Right.
And especially if the target's moving. And if it's a headshot, it's understood in his line of work that is designed to send a message. It's like the mob. When the mob would hit people, they'd stuff dead rats in their mouth because they had said something. They were talking to the feds.
Okay.
They're rats.
Okay.
That's a message. Or if they're going to kill John Gotti, they're going to do it on a New York street out front of a steakhouse or somewhere in front of plain view in front of everybody. And it's going to be a big bloody mess. And it's a message. The headshot to JFK was a message to future presidents. There is a process that you have become part of. And whether you like it or not, doesn't matter what you campaigned on, what you said. It doesn't matter if you agree or disagree, you are now part of this process. And if you aren't, or if you don't cooperate, something bad is going to happen to you. And it's one of the reasons why, and I don't think it's just the presidents. I think it happens to senators and congressmen too. And it's one of the reasons why these politicians famously go back on their word so many and break so many of their promises. And it's why, if you look at the presidents since JFK, the majority of them, and I just did a big 2-hour video on this, the majority of them have been part of this process which promotes constant war, NATO expansion, and U.S. hegemony around the world to create this unipolar world whereby the United States is the only global superpower. And you just go back and you look from JFK at LBJ, it was Vietnam. After LBJ, it was Nixon. And Nixon did not go along with the process. They thought he would because when he was younger, he was just as corrupt as anybody. But he ended Vietnam, peace with honor, he said. And he went to Russia, he went to China, and he began ushering in a period of détente, trying to end the Cold War. That's a problem. These folks, these neocons, need constant war. Okay, so if you are trying to end war or not get into wars like JFK, that's a problem. If you are ending wars and trying to bring peace and end the Cold War like Nixon, that's a problem. So you set him up and you take him out with a Watergate scandal. And then you replace him with Ford, who's very corrupt. He's already hidden the secrets of JFK assassination. And so he pardons Nixon so they can't have a trial of Nixon where any of this can come out, right? Just like they killed Oswald's, there's no trial. They pardoned Nixon, so there's no trial. Ford is followed up by, and he serves like 2 years. And the mistake that Ford made was he signed on to the Helsinki Agreement, which is a human rights agreement between us and Russia. And so they washed their hands of him and put all their stock in Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy Carter rebuilt the military, but didn't get us in any war. So he was just a one-termer. Then we come to Reagan. Reagan serves 8 long years, the biggest military buildup in the history of our country. He even breaks the Soviets with this Cold War spending and all this military spending, talks about Star Wars, etc. He's followed up by George H.W. H.W. invades Iraq. He's followed up by Clinton. All of these guys are expanding NATO, by the way. They promised not to do that, but they're expanding NATO one president at a time. Clinton is followed up by George W., who that's Iraq, that's Afghanistan, that's 9/11. And then after him, you got Barack Obama, and he's the one that meddled in all the affairs of Ukraine, and that's why Ukraine and Russia are in a war as we speak. And then you got Trump in there, and Trump's the only one who said, "I'm not going along with the process. We're not going along with these wars. We're not. I'm not going to expand NATO and cause problems for my Russian friends." He didn't go along with the process. And so look what's happened to him up into and including 2 assassination attempts. And they tried to send a message to him with a headshot. The same thing. So, it's purposeful. It has a reason. People say there's no deep state. There is a power that is so strong that presidents, whom we vote into power as the chief executive of our country, the most powerful man in the world, he's not the most powerful entity on earth, because there is something under, I don't know what you want to say, above him, below him, whatever, that pull their strings and really tell them what they're going to do. And if they cooperate, things go well for them. And the CIA helps get them elected. The CIA helps get them reelected. The CIA covers up their scandals like Hunter Biden and all that kind of stuff. And he protects them. But if you don't go along with the process, you become a target. And so, JFK was a target. Nixon was a target. I have come a little bit changed my view on Carter. I mean, I don't think Carter was a good leader. I don't think he was a good president. But I don't think he was such a good-hearted person. I don't think he was not one of the he was from Georgia. He was a peanut farmer. He was not part of the establishment, the elite. And I don't think he wanted to go along with, because you think about it, he didn't go along with the process. So he only lasted 1 term. And in comes Reagan, and all of the stuff that the deep state and the national security apparatus wants, which is a lot of military spending, constant wars to use that military spending to justify more military spending, NATO expansion, all those things. Reagan gave them on a silver platter. Bush gave them on a silver platter. Clinton gave them on a silver platter. Well, Barack Obama gave them on a silver platter. And then they run into Trump, and he won't give them any of it. And so 2 impeachments later, a counterintelligence investigation later, a Russia hoax later, 2 assassination attempts later, 4 criminal trials, 1 civil trial later. It's a miracle the man is still alive, much less pregnant.
Right. So to round off that segment of questions, on the HW issue, what do you think his motive was to lie about not remembering where he was that day?
Well, because HW and the Bush family, there's a reason the Bush family and the Clinton family are best friends. We all know the Clinton family, there's an element of it that is so dark. Okay, we all understand that. People on our side have been hesitant to see that in the Bush family. But the Bush family is neck deep, going back to even the father-in-law of George H.W. Prescott and all those guys. He goes back to Sullivan and Cromwell and those big law firms that were helping put the world together after World War One. So he has a lot to hide.
Apparently.
He has a lot to hide. And, you know, just someday, just for kicks and giggles, read about Barry Seal, the pilot that worked for ran all the drugs for Pablo Escobar into our country, and ask him who his bosses were, or read about who his bosses were and how he died. Yeah.
Okay, so
and you know, just one other thing, HW, it wasn't just JFK and that assassination. You realize that he was eating dinner with the parents of John Hinckley Jr. the night before John Hinckley Jr. tried to kill Ronald Reagan.
no way.
They were family friends. Oh yeah.
So I could get down a rabbit. Was that
okay? I don't want to go. I just laid that out like a big matzo ball, and you can kind of run with it.
So cruel. That was so cruel.
So George H. Bush was eating dinner with the parents of the man who shot Reagan.
Yeah, they were family friends. The Hinkleys and the Bushes were family friends.
So was Hinckley a patsy, or did he really do it? I mean, was it MK Ultra?
I don't know. I haven't really studied that.
Okay.
I just know that when you talk about Bush, and I go back to what I earlier said, he has a lot to hide.
So wait, was that, and that's at the time that he is vice president?
Yeah, because Reagan was president.
So he's vice president eating dinner with the parents of the guy who's going to shoot the president, which would, if it had succeeded, then he would be president, just like with LBJ and
You're
JFK.
Putting the puzzle pieces together.
So he's like, well, wait a minute. This worked once for somebody I knew. Wow. Let's try it again.
And where did George H.W. Bush make his bones in the government? Where did he get his start?
The CIA.
He was CIA director.
But why eat dinner with the parents of the guy that's getting ready to shoot him? Like, that would be like a tell.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not saying that he ordered them to do it. I just say there's a connection there.
There's obviously a connection there.
It's certainly worth examining.
Like one of those things, like, I told you to do it, but not yet, son.
Well, this also brings it back to,
or I wanted it to get done and you just took it into your hands.
We say it was 60 years ago. Most of the people that would have been, involved or implicated are dead now. And that's, mostly true, but it's not 100% true.
Because Roger Stone's still around.
Well, yeah. But I'm thinking about George W. Bush, right? And when I see him, he really looks like he does have a lot to hide. And I don't think that, I think his stupidity is George W. I think his stupidity is an act. I don't think he's as dumb as he
Michelle
pretends to be.
You say, well, why would they eat dinner with the guy who's going to kill the president the next day? These folks are so arrogant, they think they can't get caught. Right. Jeb Bush, while he's running for governor, is flying around the state in Florida on a plane that Barry Seal used to run drugs from Colombia up into Mena, Arkansas.
No way.
It was Barry Seal's plane. And Jeb Bush used his plane to campaign on.
Wow.
I mean,
it is arrogance. No, you make a really good point there.
That's just chutzpah is what it is.
So Barry, what else that you've gone through? What's next on your list?
All right, this is a memo, the Schlesinger memo. It's in this tranche of documents. James Schlesinger was in the Kennedy administration, and he wrote a famous memo that until today I've never seen. Oh. No one's seen it. We just heard it existed, but it was like everybody's trying to remember what it said. Now we have it. And this goes to motive, why the CIA would want to participate in a plot to kill the president. That's one of the arguments that's always been bandied about in defense of the CIA. What would be their motive to want to kill the president? Mm-hmm. Well, Schlesinger wrote a memo, and he called, and this was a memo that was addressed to the president. And he called the CIA, quote, a state within a state. This was on June 30, 1961. This is right after Bay of Pigs.
Wow.
And the president is being blamed for Bay of Pigs. Schlesinger is going to make a case it's the CIA's fault. And he says the CIA has grown too powerful, it's too reckless, and is now running its own foreign policy. And he says outside the control of the U.S. government, meaning you don't even have control over it. And he continues, he says, the CIA has its own military, which was true. It has its own air force. It outnumbers U.S. diplomats in key embassies around the world. The covert ops are shaping U.S. policy without presidential approval, meaning they're doing things that you don't even know about. And he cited Iran, Guatemala, Cuba as proof. In the 50s, the CIA was running wild in Iran, Guatemala, and Cuba. The failed secret wars like the Bay of Pigs are costing America credibility and strengthening communism. The guerrilla warfare isn't won with force alone. Citing lessons from Vietnam, Algeria, and the Philippines, Schlesinger told Kennedy, quote, they will bleed you to death. And he says, look at MI6 in Britain. They do not operate outside of strict controls. They have strict controls, but the CIA here at home is running unchecked. And so his suggestion at the end of the memo was to dismantle the CIA, its operational arm, split it into two parts, one part an intelligence gathering part and another part a foreign research agency, and to eliminate all the covert ops capabilities of the CIA. Now, right on the heels of that, this is why the CIA hid these files for so long, because that is direct motive.
Oh my gosh.
That is a recommendation from within the Kennedy administration to go to war with the CIA and completely overhaul its mandate. By the way, also in this document, we found out that the CIA was actually, there was evidence that they were operating covertly here at home, domestically, which is against the law. The way the CIA was established was only to do covert ops abroad.
Okay.
But we did not want a secret police here at home.
Okay.
And in this document dump, we find out that which corroborates what James Schlesinger said in his memo. So this is one of the reasons why the CIA didn't want people to read these documents, because A, it shows that this evidence has been there for 61 years, that this Miami cabal, which included the CIA, killed the president. And it was hidden from the Warren Commission all these years.
Wow.
And now there's a motive because of the Schlesinger memo. And now, as backup to the Schlesinger memo, is the CIA's own admission that they're operating domestically, which they're not supposed to be doing. And then you have the report from Gary Underhill, which we already talked about, saying that it was a rogue element within the CIA who killed the president. You see why the CIA didn't want these documents released? I just gave you 4 quick things, which when you pile them on top of each other, point to the CIA being involved pretty strongly. And yet, not only was it not even investigated, not only was it didn't make the report, it wasn't even investigated. J. Edgar Hoover saw to that, as did Allen Dulles. And meanwhile, the old misdirection with the United States people, don't worry about what you see over here. Focus on Lee Harvey Oswald. I know he's dead. He can't defend himself, but just trust us. He did it. So that's a huge piece. If you've been looking for motive for the CIA, there's your motive right there.
I guess my brain goes again to today, right?
What's that?
My brain, as you're talking about this stuff, like, okay, JFK assassination, and I want to make sure that is all, we get that all fleshed out, but my brain can't help but think about like right now. Okay. And so if you've got the CIA that at that time was operating covertly domestically, then of course they have been continuing to do so ever since then. And that would be, again,
that was one of the reasons they fought so hard to keep these documents, is because if 61 years ago we find out they're operating domestically, you would think within the next 61 years we'd do something about it to stop it. So in order to be able to continue to operate domestically, they got to keep that out of the record. Here's another piece. How many times have you been told that Lee Harvey Oswald was a marksman, that he was trained by the Marines, and he was a sharpshooter that could make that shot? In their own investigation. In their own military records, which they include in the report, Oswald was a quote, poor shot. Now,
Wow.
I talk about this with my students all the time, because people don't realize the designations in the Marine Corps and what a marksman is versus a sharpshooter. He was in the lowest category.
Wow.
But unless you study that, you don't really know because marksman sounds as good as sharpshooter, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in the Marine lexicon, it's not the same. And in this official report, they are stating as a fact, according to his military records, which later disappeared, of course, that he is a poor shot. But they can't release that because that would go against the lone gunman narrative.
Right.
They also, and this was a teaser, when Trump first won re-election, announced that the records were going to be released. Pam Bondi, the attorney general, teased everybody and said, I've looked at everything and I believe there was a second shooter.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember when she said that?
Yeah.
The reason she said that is because it's in the documents
Oh.
that there was a second shooter, probably on the grassy knoll, probably behind a picket fence. All these years that we've been saying that, and 61 years in the documents, they know it to be true. But if you said it, I mean, if you said it on YouTube, they might take you down, right? If you were called a conspiracy theorist. And now, in their own words, there was a second shooter.
So that was uncovered in the new documents that they are admitting that they theorized a second shooter. So I guess we could, because we've been talking about the shooting, and then unfortunately for me, Leah has been, as she's scrolling through Twitter, I have seen Kennedy's head blown off like 6 times in the last 10 minutes.
Not that many
It's
times.
like, I keep looking over and it's like kaploy, and it's so gross. Like it's legit.
But that's the
Anybody that says Kennedy's still alive, like, I'm so sorry. That head is blown up.
Right,
Okay.
but you were the first one to explain to us the Zapruder film, and you're more than welcome to play it for people if you'd like.
I'm worried about the tech issues. I thought about doing that. I decided not to. There was a lot that I would be showing right now if I didn't want the stream to freeze up on us.
So why don't you explain to people a little bit about what the Zapruder film is and how
that wasn't supposed to be
get the
seen.
real footage, the whole footage.
That wasn't supposed to be seen by the public. And we were just taking the FBI's word for it that he'd been shot from above and behind.
Okay.
And that was the narrative. And by the time people saw the Zapruder film, they'd sort of accepted that because you don't have any physical,
right?
You haven't seen anything with your own 2 eyes.
Was there anything there was no national television of this event, like legit? No one had seen anything about the parade, or was the parade?
Oh, you mean live?
Yeah.
No, there was not. I mean, there was, but there was no like NBC TV recording. It was just that Abraham Zapruder, and there were several others, but the Dallas police and the FBI went around and confiscated her, but they just missed Abraham Zapruder. He was standing on the pergola up on the grassy knoll up
and
on the
he sold
Dealey
it to
Plaza.
Time magazine, right?
He sold it to Time, and then CIA got their hands on it, and eventually it ended up in a Time Life vault. And as far as anybody knew, it was never going to leave that vault.
And had never been seen. Like Time magazine buys the most important footage.
Well, they put
American
still
history.
shots in their magazine, but a still shot, you can make a still shot show anything you want.
Sure.
And they transposed some of the frames, they reversed some of the frames to make it look like the head was going forward instead of backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And then Dan Rather came out and he said that he had seen it. And on his news broadcast, he said the head rocked violently forward.
Mm-hmm.
Violently forward.
Mm-hmm. But that's not what happened.
The assumption was no one would ever see the Zapruder film to be able to dispute that. But there was a guy named Robert Groden. Oh, there you go. Okay, watch where the head. He said it went violently forward. You can see it did not go. No, that's the fatal shot right there. He's already been hit. He's been hit. Well, he's actually been hit a couple times. He's been hit in the neck. He's been hit in the back, and now he gets hit in the side of the head, and he falls back into the left. Yeah, because he gets hit in the back. Okay, Leah, it goes like this. The first shot that hits him in the neck. It goes right through the windshield, which means a front shot. All right. That's why he's holding his neck like this. Then as he straightens up because he gets hit in the neck, the next shot hits him right in the back, which pushes him down. And then the third shot, which came about 5 seconds after the original shot, the Secret Service could have saved his life
Issue of
if the
Zapruder and
driver
what he
had done
knew.
what he was. So then the third shot takes him in the side of the temple and blows his head out the back. And it's the only frangible bullet. The
What
other
does that mean,
shots,
frangible?
it explodes on contact.
Okay.
You mean it was
All right.
designed to do that?
Yeah, that's what it creates a bigger wound. The head shot was a frangible bullet, which I go back to my point. It was a message shot. They wanted to blow his head off. So they used a frangible bullet on his head, but the other bullets were full metal jackets. That indicates two guns.
Right. Yeah, because you can't have it coming out of the same weapon like
Exactly. So right away, you got to know there's two guns, which they knew, according to the documents that we just got. They knew all along. And if you just look at the wounds, the first shot took him in the front neck, which means a front shot. The second shot hit him in the back, which means from behind. And the third shot from the side. That's three different directions.
that. Wow.
So you have two different kinds of bullets. You have three different directions. You have wounds. A frangible bullet does not explode the front of the head. It creates a small entrance wound and a gaping exit wound. So if the exit wound is in the back of the head, that means the entrance wound is in the front. And that's exactly what happened.
You
So-
can see it in the film.
Yeah.
Like you see
And they did
it.
not think anyone would ever see that film. But Robert Groden made a bootleg copy when he was hired. His photography firm was hired to do some work on the original. He saw it. He's, oh my God, this is. So he made a bootleg copy and he showed it to Geraldo Rivera, and then boom, everybody saw it. And next thing you know, Oliver Stone is subpoenaing it for the Clay Shaw trial, and it's been out there ever since. That single piece of evidence brought about the House Select Committee trial because no one believed the narrative anymore. They watched it with their own two eyes and they said, that is not a shot from behind.
Yeah.
There's no way.
I want you
And
to
all this time, they knew that there were two shooters. All this time.
somebody put together an animation. I want you to tell people what you're seeing. Is this the quote unquote? I just retweeted it.
Is it this one on the right here?
Yeah. Is this the magic
Single bullet
that-
was
I'm gonna mute it because I want to hear what Barry has to say here. Let me go ahead and switch screens.
Is this what they're saying happened, or did this? Because obviously.
single bullet was fired sixth floor window. First, it entered JFK's upper back and traveled downward, exiting through his throat. Then it struck the governor in the back, shattering a rib as it tore through his chest. The bullet continued, exiting the governor's chest and hitting his right wrist, breaking a bone. Finally, it lodged itself into the governor's thigh, where it stayed until removed by doctors in almost perfect condition. Now, investigators claimed that this is what happened. A single bullet caused 6 wounds while staying intact. But many argue that the bullet's trajectory is impossible. The angles just don't add up, leaving us wondering if there was actually more than one bullet.
All right, so what I do, well, they're trying their best. That the whole magic bullet theory is preposterous. I mean, it defies common sense. I take my students, whenever I teach this to my students, I put them, we make a car in the front of the room, and I have where JFK was sitting in a seat, and then I have John Connolly where he's sitting. And I bring up a girl, and she's my Jackie, and it's always a big laugh because I say, "Who here's willing to get your head blown off today? Because we need a Kennedy." So somebody will inevitably volunteer, and so we'll put them in all the spots, and then I'll have another guy go up pretend to be Oswald, and I'll arrange him where he would have been in the Texas School Book Depository. And most of the time I've been teaching in Tennessee, and these kids hunt. They understand hunting.
Yeah.
And by the time I get to the first movement of the bullet, where they're saying it hit him in the back, then inside his body, it stopped going down, it started going up, and it came out the front of his neck. They're like, wait a second, bullets don't do that. And I said, well, just time out. Wait, this bullet is special. It's magic. So then I show how it comes out the front of his neck, and then in midair, it makes a right turn and goes over to hit Connolly. And then it goes through the armpit, comes out the arm. Then it comes out the arm and does a somersault and embeds itself in his left thigh. The film there just showed his right thigh. It was his left thigh. There's like 3 changes of direction and 4 changes of trajectory and all that. It's impossible. Then, if you look at the Warren Commission exhibit, it is a pristine bullet with just a tiny little dimple on the end, which when they went through John Connolly's injured wrist and they scraped out the metal pieces, there was more metal in his wrist than was missing from that pristine bullet. So it's
yeah, we have a problem here.
That should be the open and closed case there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, I could go on and on. So there's so many times where that is the case. It's patently ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. My 17-year-old students are laughing. By the time we get to the end, they're like, this is the stupidest story I've ever heard. Where did you hear this story? I said, it's in a war, and I'll bring them the book. The Warren Commission, it's 888 pages. I said, this book right here, this very official looking book, and then I'll put the picture up on the screen of the Warren Commission handing over the first copy to LBJ and all the pictures. I said, this is what you've been taught.
So this magic bullet that just comes out, 6 wounds, perfectly pristine. Why is it so important for the plotters to have only one shooter?
Because it's a bolt action rifle, and there's only the time frame of the shooting from beginning to end. It takes 2.9 seconds to recycle a bolt action rifle and make your second shot. So if you've got it recycled and ready and you take your first shot, you're on the clock. And to get to fit it within 5.9 seconds, you only have time for 3 shots. If it's a single gunman. Remember, this is all about protecting the narrative that it's a single gunman.
That there was no conspiracy.
And they know.
Right.
Yeah, and they know that one shot missed because James Tague was standing at the overpass and he got nicked with a bullet that missed the car. So that only leaves 2 shots. We know one shot took the president's head off. That only leaves 1 shot. And Kennedy has a wound in the back, a wound in the front of the neck. Connolly has a wound in the back of the arm, a wound in the front of the arm, and a wound in his thigh.
Okay, so I have a question.
How does one bullet account for all those wounds? So that's why they came up with the so-called magic bullet.
So these documents, that's what we're here to talk about tonight, and this is so pertinent. Now, it can't just be documents, right? Because there's going to be physical evidence that has been collected. However, there should be documents to go along with the physical evidence. My question is, if it hasn't already come out, I'm assuming it hasn't, or we really would have heard about it. Do you expect, like, they would have recovered these casings? They would have recovered, the bullets existed. All of these bullets that literally did happen.
Bullets disappeared, Michelle.
But do you think it would be in the reports?
Well, if you collect it and turn it in, it will be. Okay. But if you put it in your pocket and it disappears before they turn it in,
That's valid.
That's what happened. Several of these bullets just disappeared. There's pictures of witnesses standing around a bullet lying in the grass, and the FBI comes over and picks it up, and we never hear from it again.
No. But that goes back to even these kind of, mobster henchmen people that you said that were there. Some of them, I'm assuming you're right that a lot of them were there as tourists, but some of them might have been there to
Right.
collect this evidence.
Oh yeah, there were people in the crowd.
They picked up stuff and made sure that nobody had film, and not everybody had a cell phone back there, but video recordings were a possibility. So,
Well, like Chauncey Holt was talking about, Chauncey Holt was one of the guys who brought all the weapons into Dallas that day. And after he'd done his job, which was to make the drop, he's just walking around, and I've seen him, he's talked on YouTube, and I've also read the book about him, and he talks about all these people he's recognizing in the crowd.
Wow.
And they're just milling around, and no one's acknowledging each other, because you don't do that.
Yeah.
But he names names, and these are all bad guys.
Yeah.
So and he had another job, and the other job was, once the shooting starts, he said, his job, he was basically innocent amongst the crowd to watch for things, right? And then he was even given an escape route. And the escape route was, if you can't get out of Dealey Plaza safely, there is a railroad car on the tracks in back. It'll appear to be locked, but it's not. And you can hide in the railroad car. And when he ran to that railroad car and jumped in, there were two other people waiting for him. They eventually get arrested, and those are the three tramps. If you've ever seen the three tramps photo, that are being marched through Dealey Plaza 2 hours after the event. They hid in that railroad car, and eventually they got found.
Wow.
And he names who they are and why they were there. They were all there for the same purpose. They were waiting out the investigation or whatever, and they eventually got caught, but they had alibis and they had documents to get them off the hook if they got caught. I say all that just to agree with you, really, is that these people have jobs when they're there, and that is to protect the narrative. If there's people taking pictures, you note those people, and then afterwards you get those cameras, you get that roll of film, whatever. But I there's a couple more things in these documents that I wanted to note.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's do it.
Okay. It turns out that these documents acknowledge the fact that Oswald worked for the CIA and was a spy. And further, that they had been surveilling him for 59 days prior to November 22nd. They were in Mexico City with him. And there's all this poppycock that the CIA was saying afterwards that we didn't know about Oswald. He was barely on our radar.
Oh, wow.
They were following him all around Mexico City and other places. And he was one of theirs. He was a counterintelligence officer. Now, it's interesting, if you look up the Mexico City story, which is the story that they tell afterwards, that he went to Mexico City to try to get travel visas to either Cuba or Russia so that after the assassination he could flee. And then while he was there, he was talking to a Russian KGB agent named Kostakov, who was an assassination expert. And they were going to release this story to the American people. And they were going to say they had evidence that he was there. Well, it didn't take long for this story to start falling apart, because the evidence that they put out there was a photograph of somebody that clearly wasn't Oswald. And then they said they had recordings of him talking in these buildings and on the phone. And when the FBI officials listened to the recordings, they had just gotten done interviewing Oswald. And they said, that's not the same guy. That's not his voice.
Wow.
So all of a sudden, the CIA had to retract the recordings and say all they had was transcripts. And they tried to hang on to this Mexico City story because it was very incriminating to Oswald for two reasons. I mean, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover knew it was crap. He even went to the president. The president asked him, what about this Mexico City stuff? This is LBJ. And he says, it wasn't him. It wasn't his picture and it wasn't his voice. So the story is falling apart, but that's a story that we've been told for 61 years, that Oswald went to Mexico City and he was negotiating with the Russians and the Cubans for a place to flee after the assassination. And he was talking with a Russian assassination expert.
Oh my God.
Within hours, Hoover is telling LBJ it's not true. It's not his voice and it's not him in the pictures. But they hung on to this story because A, it's so incriminating, and B, it was more important. It was a cover story. It was more important to hide the real reason he was there. Oswald was there, but he wasn't there for the reasons that they said he was there.
Mm.
Now, if you followed my medical Manhattan story, you know why he was really there. He was there to make the drop. But that was a project that the CIA was also involved with. It involves a bioweapon, and they could not allow the American people to know anything about the bioweapon project. So they made up a cover story and said he was there to talk to the Russians and Cubans, and he was talking to Kostikov and all this stuff. And the evidence they supplied to back that up was so flimsy that the picture, I show my students this. I put a picture because you can find it on Google Images, the Mexico City Oswald. You should pull it up, Leah.
Oh, Leah did. I think I saw that. He's kind of a little bit more chunky and older.
It's not even close to resembling Lee Harvey Oswald.
Okay. Mexico City Oswald. All right, let's pull up these images.
The dark haired, kind of chunky, 6'2".
Hang on.
If I remember right, he's wearing a white shirt. You see him?
Hang on, wait. I'll screen share what I've got.
Yeah, right there. Go up to the top. Go right there. Yeah, now scroll down a little bit and click on that guy right there, top left. Yeah, all these guys. This is that guy, but the guy right there in the center. Yeah, that's who they said was Oswald. It's not, and that's why J. Edgar Hoover told LBJ it's the CIA making up a story, and they knew that within hours. And so here is another case where the CIA flat out lied to the American people, saying, A, we didn't know who Oswald was. We weren't in contact with him. They were trailing him around for 59 days. And somebody was in Mexico City signing in to all these buildings as Oswald.
Wow.
And it's one of those doppelgangers. And
not even a good one.
No, not even a good one. And then the recordings on the phone were clearly not him. So this is one of the reasons why the CIA doesn't want these files out, because this shows that they've been lying about, this is like the fifth thing I've showed you about the CIA so far.
You mentioned J. Edgar. I just want to point this out. I'm following you. You mentioned J. Edgar Hoover was admitting, we just interviewed the real Oswald. We know what he sounds like. This guy isn't it. At what point, if J. Edgar Hoover isn't in on it to start with, at what point, do you think he is privy now to what's really gone on, and now he has to be part of the cover-up?
No, Hoover was in on it from the beginning, as far as having foreknowledge and covering it up.
Yeah, but then why would he say that? Why would he admit that wasn't the real Oswald?
He's communicating to his best friend LBJ, and between friends, he's telling him that's bull crap. Okay,
that makes sense.
And they both know what this is. This is he's running cover for Alan Dulles and the CIA, but between friends, that's not our guy.
I'm following now. Okay.
There's another interesting document where the CIA is monitoring Italy, Spain, France, Germany, England, all their media outlets, and putting pressure on them to repeat the narrative that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. And it's in their document that we have to watch for this publication and that one, because these could be trouble, this could be trouble. And they are monitoring all these media outlets to control the narrative, not just here at home, but overseas as well.
Oh my gosh.
And this is, we learned about Operation Mockingbird, which was when they infiltrated the press here at home, but they also did it overseas. And so this doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the, the shooting, but it has everything to do with the cover up. And how if they're doing that to foreign media outlets, what do you think they're doing to domestic media outlets? By the way, do you know who originated the pejorative term, conspiracy theorist?
No.
It was the CIA.
Oh yeah. Okay, I think you might have said that. Tell that again, because I'm forgetting.
They had several, they had all these media personalities that were under their sway, and there was a report that said that they were trying to persuade and were successful in persuading some of these media outlets to start using the term conspiracy theorist as a rebuttal to people who, because
Like a
these books
slur.
were starting to, as a slur, as a pejorative term. And it came straight out of the CIA, and then these media outlets picked it up. And then you know how the media acts like an echo chamber, and they all repeat what each other's saying. And pretty soon, that became sort of the way to, like you said, slur people or smear people who don't believe the narrative.
Right. They're still doing it today.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we still do it. Like literally, at the end of our show, every show we end with, it's not just a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. That's our tagline. And because we're the tinfoil hat wearers, right? Like that's because if they can make you seem uncredible, I guess is the right word. Then they don't have to listen to anything that you have to say. Oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist.
Right. Another document that came out showed a laundry list of all the Secret Service failures leading up to the shooting, all of which were under suspicion, which is why it made this investigation, because some of the breakdowns in security looked intentional. And this is, you talk about relevant. This
What
is
does
exactly
that sound like?
Butler, Pennsylvania. It's called security stripping. And, we didn't know it at the time, but there were some straight Secret Service officers who tried to prevent what was fixing to happen. And they got taken out before or during or after. One of them was the driver. He died a month before the trip to Dallas. Very suspicious circumstances. He was honest broker. Another one was the guy that I think his name was Chuck Robertson. He was in Dallas. He was a field agent. He'd gotten word of what was happening. He ran to the streets when the motorcade started and intercepted the motorcade, and he was shouting something, and no one really understood what he was shouting. He was arrested, wrestled to the ground, arrested, and he disappeared. And his family continued to get their paychecks, and he had like 8 kids or something. His wife and kids continued to get his paychecks, but they never saw their dad or husband again. He just disappeared. Yeah. There was one other Secret Service agent named Abraham Bolden. He was the first black Secret Service agent to ever serve in the White House. He had been handpicked by JFK. And he was in Chicago when the Chicago plot happened. And then after the JFK assassination, he starts putting pieces together, and he wants to go public and testify. Secret Service found out, and they trumped up some charges and threw him in prison and tried to break his brain with a series of drugs. He just recently, I don't know if he's still alive. He recently got pardoned by Biden, but they tried to kill him in prison with drugs. They did kill the driver, and they did kill Chuck Robertson. They tried to kill Abraham Bolden. So there were 3 Secret Service agents who tried to do something about but all you got to do is corrupt a few people at the top. That's all you got to do. And then replace all of the people that are normally on the detail with a bunch of, just like they did in Butler, with a bunch of rent-a-cops that don't know what they're doing. And you don't have to shoot anybody. You just have to let down the security.
Right.
And then open him up as a target. That document is in this bunch, showing, itemizing all the different security breakdowns. And I always do this with my class. I start off at Love Field, and we just go through all the breakdowns in security. By the time we get to Dealey Plaza, he's like a lamb being led to the slaughter. He thinks it looks like from the outside, because you got men running around in suits and their little earpieces, but they don't. It's hollowed out security. They're not doing none of them are doing what they're supposed to. The driver has been trained to hit the gas after the first shot. Never did that. The guy in the passenger seat has been trained to turn around, jump on top of the president. He never moved. The people in the backup car, it's full of Secret Service agents. Some of them are riding on the running boards. Never moved. The car was supposed to get out between him and the shooter. Never moved. There were supposed to be 2 Secret Service agents on the back running boards of the Cadillac or the Lincoln that the president was in. They were dispensed with, told to go get a coffee or something at Love Field. Yeah, there's video footage of that where they're waving their arms like, why? What? I'm supposed to be here. Why am I? Why? So they just systematically removed all the security. And then when they made those 2 90-degree turns and slowed the limo down, and then after the first shot, the limo driver basically hit the brakes. Jackie even said later, if that limo driver had hit the gas, my husband would still be alive. He would have lived after the throat shot. He would have lived after the back shot. It was the head shot that took him out. And after the head shot, he finally turns around and takes off.
Wow.
But anyway, that document shows that this investigation knew 61 years ago that the Secret Service was involved. So, wrapping this all up, ladies, who are the 5 suspects that these documents, to this point, I haven't gone through all of them yet, point out as an alternative to Lee Harvey Oswald? We have the 3-headed monster in Miami, the CIA, the Cubans,
and the mafia,
and the mob. And you have LBJ, told you about him requesting his clothes, and you have the Secret Service. Those are the same 5 suspects I wrote about in that book that you're holding in your hand.
Which you all should get.
The Treasonous Cabal. I have the link on our website, but you can also just go to Amazon and get it, Barry Jones.
Hey, there is a document that's missing so far. I haven't found it.
Okay.
If you ladies find it before me or one of your listeners finds it, shoot me an email because I'd love to see it. It's the conversation between LBJ and the CIA director, John McCone. It's the first one-on-one conversation between the 2 of them after LBJ became president. McCone later hid all kinds of evidence from the Warren Commission. And there is a lot of suspicion that LBJ, in this private meeting with McCone, informed McCone that he is to cooperate with the commission by not giving anything that would be damaging to the agency or to the government in general, only lone gunman narrative kind of stuff. None of that can be proven. But somewhere out there, there's a document about that first meeting because it happened in the White House.
Wow.
So there is a document about that first meeting and might provide some sort, because John McCone was not like Dulles. John McCone was not like all the other CIA directors after him or before him. He was sort of a guy that came in from the outside. He was put there after Alan Dulles was fired. They hid a lot of things from him. There was a lot that he didn't know because he was an outsider. And he was always understood. It was always understood he wasn't going to be there very long. He was a temporary fill-in until they could find the next guy. And I think that he served a purpose. I think he served a very useful purpose, which is kind of like security stripping with the Secret Service. You put the young guys in these positions that they're not really capable of carrying out. I think McCone was in a position where he was told how he was going to handle this. And there was this one-on-one meeting with him and LBJ. I think LBJ gave him the message, and he followed through, and he withheld all this key evidence from the Warren Commission. I can't prove it. Somewhere there's a document out there, and it should have been in this batch. And maybe I'll get to it, but so far I haven't. So, oh, by the way, just to bring it up to date, there was a document of a letter allegedly written by JFK Jr. to Joe Biden in '94, where he called him a traitor.
Wow.
Now, this is in the public domain. It's already been released. The FBI was investigating the author of that letter. It's signed JFK Jr., but they could not verify that it's actually him. And so it's in this batch of documents because it's a Kennedy, I guess. But I just thought it was interesting. Back in 1994, JFK Jr. wrote a letter to Joe Biden and called him a traitor.
Wow.
And it was considered a threat. And so the FBI was investigating it.
Wow.
I don't know,
Wow.
that's just for
Well,
kicks
and then
giggles.
he dies in a
No, JFK
Yes.
Jr.
JFK Jr. died in,
JFK Jr. Okay.
in a plane
JFK
crash.
Jr.
What was that, like 3 or 4 years later?
It's when he was making noise about running for Senate against Hillary Clinton. New York.
It's so convenient.
Wow.
It's so convenient. Okay,
Wow.
so Barry, so with everything that you have seen so far, and I know you're still digging, and maybe after the next batch comes out or whatever, we'll have you back on. But what aside from feeling pretty good about your own research and everything like that, and kind of a little bit vindicated and stuff, what are your thoughts on the entire thing, and how should we? I do have a couple more questions I want to ask you that bring us up to date, but how do you feel about it so far, and how we should be kind of feeling about it ourselves?
I think it's a very important event that just happened. And I think it's really important to the psyche of the American people and to the spiritual nature of our beings to be able to understand what really happened and to be able to deal in truth. And it's unfortunate that it's taken this long, but these puzzle pieces are slowly but surely bringing us closer to the truth. I know as I read through that list and I began to put these pieces together, something leaped inside of me because truth resonates with my heart. I think it does with most people. We're suckers for the truth. You can kind of tell when you're being lied to. You might not be able to prove it, but you have an instinct about it. And I've gotten to the point studying this as long as I've had that I don't believe anything. And this is why I was so skeptical when I heard these documents were coming out. I thought, well, they'll be cleansed, they'll be redacted, they'll be manufactured stuff in it, because I have so little trust in the institutions now. And the first and most important step in restoring any trust in our institutions is going back and admitting where we were wrong and acknowledging the truth for what it is. And if that means it offends people, if that means it's embarrassing to agencies or institutions or whatever, I think we're strong enough as a people to be able to endure and get past that. I think at least we should be given an opportunity to do that. And you can't build a future on lies. And that's what we've been trying to do. And all it does is once you get away with one lie is it begets another lie, which begets bigger lies and more. And then you have an entire house of cards that's built on nothing but lies. And I feel like this is a small but very important step in trying to get back to a real foundation of truth. We're not there yet,
Right.
but it is at least, if nothing else, it is destroying the myth that pursuing truth is a fool's errand.
That's good.
It is destroying the myth or this pejorative term of conspiracy theory where just because you don't agree with the government means you're wrong. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe they're wrong on purpose.
Yeah.
Maybe they're hiding something in it. And that's really what this is about. So for a whole host of reasons, I think this was important. And I'm glad that.
That's a really good quote, by the way. Keep going.
What's that?
That you're destroying the myth that the pursuit of truth is a fool's errand.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
it is a.
That's
And it's
quotable.
worthwhile. It's a worthwhile pursuit, even if it costs you something, because you can't build a future on lies. And we've been trying as a nation. And I think I talk to so many people who say the same thing. They're like, well, life goes on. We have to move on with our lives. But I always felt like the government was lying to us. And if that becomes your default position, then the next time the government tells you something about an issue, and you find out that they lied to you, how many times before you don't believe anything they tell you anymore?
Right.
And you can't have a republic, which is what we are, where people have lost faith in the institutions or the people that run them.
That's really good.
Right.
Faith, you got to have honesty, you got to have truth, you got to have that faith.
Yeah.
That's good. So my mom has a question. She says, what is his take on Trump's picks for department heads like the CIA and the FBI and the NSA?
Well, I always say wait and see, because I thought William Sessions was going to be a good attorney general.
I
And man,
know. And then he
I
recused
thought
himself, and then we never heard from him again.
Is he
I
still
thought William
alive?
Barr, I thought William Barr was going to be a good attorney general.
So did
And
we.
I mean, so I'm withholding judgment. I am very optimistic about RFK.
Yeah, me too.
I'll tell you what speaks to me, ladies. It's when people sacrifice something to be in those positions. Not when they're just rising through the ranks and looking at the next job. These people gave up something.
Right.
Robert F. Kennedy was running for president, and he did something that cost him a lot because his own family turned on him. Same thing with Tulsi Gabbard. Um, Same thing with Elon Musk. He doesn't have to be doing what he's doing. He doesn't have to do this, but he is. And there's something about, you think about Trump, he's collected a bunch of people that don't have to be doing what they're doing, but they are sacrificing to do it. Just like Trump doesn't have to be doing this.
What do you
And
think about Kash Patel?
Well, I mean, I've listened to him 100 times, and I'm cautiously optimistic on him as well. He is another one of these guys who suffered. And there's something about suffering that earns credit in my bank anyway, because I think you know what it's like to be blackballed or blacklisted. You know, Kash Patel was part of that group that looked at that investigative group that looked into the Russiagate stuff, and he was on staff
With
for
Devin Nunes, yeah.
Devin Nunes, and I mean he just got run through the ringer, just like Devin Nunes did. Tulsi Gabbard was put on some kind of list where she wasn't allowed to fly on planes, right? And the whole Democrat Party turned on her. RFK, his family turned on him. The Democrat Party turned on him. He's just surrounded, and Trump's had more than his share. I just look at people he's picking who have suffered, and I think I have a lot of hope in people like that, because I feel like they don't care anymore. They've already lost all the prestige. They've already worked their way through I think some of these folks, they want to be liked. They want the establishment to say nice things about them. They want to go on the Sunday TV shows, and they want to write books, and they want to make money. These people have suffered. I mean, RFK was one of the first ones to be banned off Facebook and Twitter and all.
The Dirty Dozen.
Yeah, he was one of the Dirty Dozen. So these guys know what it's like to be on the bottom of things, looking up, and be laughed at and scorned and all the things. And now, interestingly, the worm has turned. And if nothing else, it's going to make a great movie someday.
Yeah, that's true.
That's really
There's one
good.
little document that came out that doesn't really mean much. I don't know, maybe it does, but people are sharing it out, and it's about chemical agricultural warfare, and it says in the group turned to a discussion of number 32, agricultural sabotage, and this was talking about, I guess, how the United States might damage Cuba. General Carter emphasized the extreme sensitivity of any such operation and the disastrous results that would flow from something going wrong, particularly if there were obvious attribution to the U.S. He went on to say, however, that it would be possible to accomplish this purpose by methods more subtle than those indicated in the paper. He mentioned specifically the possibility of producing crop failures by the introduction of biological agents that would appear to be natural origin. I'm thinking about like Lyme's disease with all the ticks, and the mosquitoes. Mr. Bundy said that he had no worries about any such sabotage, which could clearly be made to appear as the result of local Cuban disaffection or of a natural disaster, but that we must avoid external activities such as the release of chemicals, etc., unless they could be completely covered up.
Yeah.
So they're really talking about this stuff. And so we have to wonder, like around the world, like if they're already talking about this in the 60s.
61.
Yeah.
This is early 60, and this is all about Operation Mongoose, and they're trying to sabotage Cuba's economy, kill the sugar cane, all of the crops down there, so the people are starving. They'll turn against Castro. It's chemical warfare, and we had learned that. We did that later in Vietnam. We were the country that used the napalm and all the different gases and chemical weapons and stuff. And again, we learned those from the Germans. The Germans were the masters at that. When we brought them to America, so is it all that hard to extrapolate if they're doing that in other countries? And we just learned in these documents that they are running covert affairs here at home as well, that they're not manipulating weather and other things here as well.
They just got better
because they have the
up,
capabilities.
I think, right?
What's that?
I think they just got better at covering it up, because I'm reading a book right now on IG Farben. I don't know if you're familiar with IG Farben.
Yeah, IG Farben, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a big one to dive into, and I've done one show on it already. But the big conglomerate, the chemical manufacturers, Germany didn't have much to go on during especially the First World War. They didn't have a lot of manufacturing base, but the one thing that they had were mad scientists, basically, who were really good at making and patenting chemicals, and that actually saved them the war pretty well, to keep going, right? Because a couple times they would have lost early on, but they didn't really feel the need to cover it up. I mean, at one point they massacred thousands of French soldiers, just watching them just die with the poison gas that they had released. And then that's why you see all the poison gas masks, were then implemented into World War I. But it's just a really sick form of warfare. And then obviously IG Farben created these IG Farben. It was IG Farben Auschwitz is what it was. And I don't think many people put together that, all of a sudden no government is ever going to be using chemicals for warfare again. I think they just got really good.
Then they turned into Monsanto and Bayer. And
I just think like government, but even just taking over, like doing sabotage, like literal sabotaging countries and things like that. I think their big thing, what I take away from that document was, whatever we do, you got to come up with a plan that it can't come back to us.
Right. Yeah. Especially Cuba, because it was 90 miles from the coast of Florida. So, they did things in Vietnam, cluster bombs that were full of mosquitoes that had malaria. Yeah.
Ugh.
So it would explode in the atmosphere, and then all you'd see is mosquitoes everywhere biting you, and everybody had malaria. So there was, but I saw that document, and that was all about Operation Mongoose. They were, I didn't talk about Operation Northwoods, but I'll finish with it. Operation Northwoods was the operation proposed by the Joint Chiefs and the CIA to Kennedy. Kennedy laughed them off, said it was crazy. It was a plan to hit American targets, even on American soil, and blame the Cubans for it, so it would cause a war.
Oh, yeah.
And they specified Miami. They were going to go after targets in Miami. And of course, Kennedy vetoed that. And he says, no, we're not going to do that. And they said, well, it's worked before. And he says, when? And they said, well, remember the Maine? You remember that ship that we sunk in Cuba off the coast of Havana when we wanted to have the Spanish-American War, and we blamed it on the Spanish? And it's right in the documents that we sunk our own ship and blamed the Spanish, and then told the American press, who went to public with it. The public were so mad about all the American soldiers who died on the battleship, the ship being sunk, that we went to war. It was our first foreign war. They said it worked so well then, it'll work again. And he laughed them off. He got up and he stormed out of the situation room and said, you all are crazy. Well, that was in June of 63. In November of 63, I believe Dallas was an Operation Northwoods moment where they fulfilled it without his permission. They didn't need his permission. Is there a bigger American target than an American president?
No.
Was he hit on American soil?
Yes.
And who did they blame for it? A patsy who was connected to Cuba and Russia. So I believe wholeheartedly that they gave him the right of first refusal by saying, if you allow us this Operation Northwoods, we'll go use it as a pretext to go to war with Cuba and kill Castro. And when he said no, they said, that's fine. We'll just turn it against you. And all the same apparatus that we've built to go get Castro will turn on you. And when you're out of the way, then we can go get Castro. So now, interestingly, the attention shifted pretty quick because the next day after his death, LBJ signed on to National Security Action Memo 273, which greenlighted Vietnam, and Cuba became a footnote, and all the attention turned to Vietnam from that point forward.
Wow.
But it accomplishes the same. These neocons want constant war, whether it's in Cuba or Russia or Vietnam. Vietnam was essentially a proxy war with Russia, just like Ukraine is now. So they got their wish. And it's 9,000 miles away, which logistically is much harder, which means a lot of money through the pipeline to these military industrial contractors. And of course, all those military industrial contractors came out of Texas. And who's the new president? LBJ. And where's he from?
Texas.
And Big Oil.
Big oil.
His Big Oil was his big supporters. Who profits in a war more than Big Oil? It takes a lot of oil to run all that machinery. So it's been great talking to you both.
So I want to wrap it up with this because I want to tell everybody about your Standards Plus history.
Okay.
Yeah, we want to.
I want to make sure that everybody can follow you. I mean, I've got your website been going on the screen the whole time, sphistory.com, Standards Plus. Tell them why it's called Standards Plus and tell them what it is and what you've been doing. Because you also have a YouTube channel too.
Yeah, I've got a YouTube channel, which is free. I put about a third of my stuff on there. And then I've got a Patreon and a Substack, which is where I store everything. Of course, that's a subscription thing. But if you don't like YouTube, I've got the same stuff on Spotify and Rumble. Rumble, I've got everything on because Rumble is, yeah, exactly. Standards Plus History Academy is something that when we came through COVID, I learned that how to teach online, how to teach remotely, and found that there was a market possibly for homeschool kids whose parents want their kids to learn history, but they don't feel comfortable teaching it themselves, or they don't know where they can get curriculum, et cetera, et cetera. So I offer all that. I've been teaching for 28 years. So I've got all the U.S. history, the world history, the U.S. government, and I also have an elective class in the JFK assassination. And I can either teach it, you can hire me to teach it, and we run through a whole semester or a whole year, depending upon the requirements, or you can just get the curriculum from me. And either or. I call it Standards Plus because I meet the minimum standard, which is the standards that the states require, but I go well beyond that and try to incorporate the backstories and the cause and effect, this interesting stuff, why things happen. And so we get into a lot of discussions and things of that nature. But so anyway, this is born out of 28 years of teaching in a system. My wife and I were looking to break free of systems and see if we can't support ourselves offering my skill and expertise and my experience as a teacher using technology. And so that's what we're doing. So we
You've been traveling the country. You literally went to all of the places, the big three recently, and you've been doing videos there. Like you're literally on the ground. Like you're like a traveling teacher.
Yeah, I'm a hobo.
Like people could literally, they could have you come and speak to, I'm assuming their churches.
Yeah,
or their
I offer that.
groups.
Right. I do public speaking. I'd love to do that. Yeah, we sold our house. We quit our jobs. We bought a fifth wheel and a truck. And there's three cities in particular that were very keyed in and involved in the JFK assassination: New Orleans, Dallas, and Miami. And so we went in October down to New Orleans and spent the month going from place to place, all the different sites, and teaching live on site on location there. And then we went in November, the 61st anniversary, and we went to Dallas, and that was interesting. I'd never been there, and that was like holy ground. So spent a lot of time doing all the live on location lessons there. And then the 61st annual conference, the JFK conference, I went to that, got to hear some speakers that I've grown to respect over the years. And then in January and February, we went to Miami, and it served two purposes: one, to study Miami, and two, to get away from Ohio winters.
It's pretty cold. Yeah, it is.
So we were in Tennessee, but man, Tennessee gets cold too. So, and right now we're back up in Tennessee visiting with kids. And next week we'll be in Ohio because we got it. Well, Dave and Shirley have their 60th anniversary, I think. So we're coming in for that.
Oh, well, maybe we should crash the party.
I don't know. We were
we
were
should.
just there for the birthday party.
60th wedding. 60th wedding anniversary. I think it's next Saturday night.
Well, that's
We're having a big shindig at the little campground down the road or whatever. But then we're going back to New Orleans because on May 13th, I'm offering a walking tour. And I'm going to take everybody who signs up to all these sites, and I'll be your tour guide and walk you around. We'll ride the trolleys. We'll finish up with some French beignets down there in the
So
French
how can they
Quarter.
sign up for that?
You can go to there is a link on my YouTube channel.
Okay.
In fact, I've done a couple YouTube videos exclusively promoting that, and there is a link to an Eventbrite site that has a ticket.
Okay.
It has all the information. So
I'll find that and I'll put it on our website tonight.
Okay.
I'll find it and I'll put it
Yeah,
up
thank
there.
you.
May 13th in New Orleans.
May 13th in New Orleans, and we go from 9 in the morning till whenever we're done, rain or shine. And we hit all these sites, and then at noon we'll stop in the French Quarter, and there's restaurants everywhere. So that'll be our lunch, and everybody will enjoy that. But New Orleans has quite a few important locations that you can still see. That's the thing. Dallas and New Orleans, you can still get up next to a lot of these sites. You can go right up to the sidewalk and right up to the porch of Lee Harvey Oswald's house.
Oh my
in Oak
gosh.
Cliff. Oh yeah, it's still there. Looks exactly the same. But you get to Miami, it's totally different because JM Wave is the CIA base, and you can't get near it. It's all fenced off. All those bases that are offshore, you can't get to. Some of them are in the Everglades. You can't get to. It's just a little bit tricky in Miami. So
that
New
sounds
Orleans,
exciting.
and in November we're going back to Dallas, and we're going to offer a walking tour in Dallas as well.
Oh my gosh.
So
That's
will
awesome.
that be like around the anniversary, November?
Man, we just got hit with a rain cloud. Can you hear that?
No. Your mic is
Oh,
good.
okay.
Your
I
mic
didn't
is
even
good.
hear what you just said.
So in November, will that be near the anniversary?
Yes, it'll be the 62nd anniversary.
Okay. Wow.
So just to your curriculum, what for all our homeschoolers, you guys, I want you guys to check that out because you'll pass the state exams, which you'll get actual real history. What is the age range, grade range for this curriculum?
What is the grade level?
Yeah.
Ninth grade is usually when you teach world history.
Okay.
11th grade is usually when you teach history, U.S. history, and 12th grade is usually when you teach U.S. government. And then the JFK elective class would probably be better for juniors and seniors.
Okay.
Or parents and adults, whomever.
Well, I love that.
Guys, the JFK class anybody can take. And anybody should take. If you guys want to take it, that'd be awesome. But I would say for homeschoolers, the rest of them, you can, because homeschoolers are kind of advanced. 9th and up, Just,
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah, I'm
you can
teaching a
take-
kid right now in California. He's a 10th grade. Well, he's really a 9th grader, and he's taking my U.S. history.
Sure.
So he's 2 years ahead.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Okay, so Barry, I want to pray for you, and I know you can hardly hear us because of your rainstorm, but I want to pray you out.
Yes.
So God, we thank you so much for Barry and Katrina.
Yes.
And everything that they're doing, and they're traveling around the country. Maybe it'll broaden to the world, but I just pray that you bless their enterprises, that you bless everything that they do and everything that they put their hands to. I thank you that they are committed to telling the truth. I pray that you open doors that no man can close, that you close doors that no man can open, that you will take them before people that they never even imagined or dreamed. I just pray that, all of this hard work that Barry has done these last, 30 years of teaching and digging and telling the truth and writing and researching, that will be made manifest so that it will be able to be utilized by people today that are on the forefront of trying to find the truth and trying to get the truth out there. And I just pray that you elevate him to the position that he has earned. And he has earned this position of notoriety where he has put in the hours. These types of things take hours. Anybody can be a podcaster, and anybody can read what somebody else has highlighted or come to a conclusion of. But Barry has done the long-legged work. So I thank you, Father God, that is going to be rewarded. And so we just thank you for his family. I thank you for the blessing that they've been to us and the blessing that Barry has been to our audience, the multiple times that he's come on our program. And so we just can't wait to see more for what you have in store. And I just pray that they will be completely provided for everywhere they go. Lord, that you will be able to pour out blessings on them that they won't have room enough to receive. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Man, that was some prayer, Michelle.
Well, I'm enthusiastic about the subject. We really
I
love
was
you
just
guys.
Trina just said you brought the rain down.
Speaking of Katrina,
We had a serious storm going on.
that's that beautiful woman, Katrina. How do they find if you're still doing the life coaching, right?
Yes.
How do they get a hold of you?
They can find me on Instagram at Simple Raw Consciousness.
I'll
I'll
put the
send
link.
you the
I'll find it.
link.
I'll put it on the website for today's show.
So what's the?
Okay.
Tell us what that is.
What that is, my channel, or
No, what you're doing with the life coaching and everything.
Hey, hang on. I'm going to step aside and let you talk to her.
This is
Aunt
so
Katrina.
there goes Uncle Barry. Here comes Aunt Katrina.
No, it's actually, if we're telling the truth,
Oh.
it's Aunt Tinkerbell.
Right.
yes.
That's what Catherine
And my
thought.
channel kind of encompasses that. I've just fully owned, April gave me that name when I was a little girl. She used to sing that to me. And she's never stopped calling me Tinkerbell. And of course, when I hit like 35, 40, you're like, okay, it's time to grow up. But then there came a point where I just like completely owned it. I was like, that is who I am. Like, I flutter about with my magical fairy dust and help people fly.
Oh,
And so, that's really what my desire. I do divine conversations. I interview people just because I'm just fascinated by humanity and how God's created people. And I love to just encourage and inspire. So that's really what I offer. If you go to my Instagram, I have a link tree and you can schedule a time, and I offer them in like half-hour increments. And that's really.
So what an example, like people for life coaching, example of like somebody who would want to contact you, what would that what would that look like?
So it would look like a very intuitive conversation. I really kind of allow just to have that, what I call a divine conversation. It's the heart of God just speaking through me and drawing life out of them, drawing what is in them out. When people need encouragement, they need inspiration. I just find that when I'm talking with people, they feel that kind of energy and encouragement, but also somehow some kind of like word just pops out as we're talking that is that thing that they didn't even know they needed to hear.
That's good.
and it just pops up. And so I just decided to, I've done this my whole life, but I've been like an undercover agent, if you will, doing other jobs, trying to kind of, and I just decided to fully own this because this is the passion of my heart. So
awesome.
I'm just pursuing that. I use the term simple because I just believe that it was all our life's journeys were always intended to be simple. Jesus talked so often about that the kingdom of God is within you, that the kingdom of heaven is within you.
Come on.
And to access it and see it unfold, which was always this mystery to me, like I just was always intrigued by those words, the kingdom of heaven. Where is it? How do you see it? Spirituality, talks about manifestation and all, everybody uses these different words. And I'm like, but what is it? But Jesus made it so simple. He said, you know what? You just have to become like a little child.
That's good.
It was always, religion complicates, but Jesus made everything very simple. We just need to be like little children. And when I observe children, you just observe all the things about children. There's that childlike trust. There's joy. They live in the present moment. They're never lost in the past. They don't even understand time. We have to program time into them.
That's good.
So, this is me, and that's why it's simple. The raw kind of has to do with being authentic and real. It kind of was a play on words when I first started the channel, believing in living food, raw living food. But I'm not one that's very dogmatic. I'm not trying to push that per se on people. It just had a double meaning of also being very raw, like real and authentic. And that consciousness meaning our awareness, like waking up from the slumber and becoming aware of who we truly are, who God has created us to be as children of God.
That's really good.
So much. I love that so much. So if you guys need a little life coaching, you're stuck in a rut,
a little passion, a little stirring up.
You need somebody to help encourage you, maybe take the next step or get out of a rut, then give Aunt Katrina a call or email.
And you can schedule a call. I don't have any problem saying this because Michelle is the youngest sister and Katrina and I have that in common. Katrina and I have a lot of things in common. So many times you guys have been like, I just wish that I could just have a phone call with Leah and Michelle. Well, here's Katrina. And Katrina is filled with the Holy Ghost. So and our audience is all about that. That's a definite bonus that you have going for you, that you believe in the gifts of the Spirit and the moving of God and the miraculous. And so I'm so glad that you popped on and we got to see you because it's been so long.
Yeah. I've been hiding in the bedroom. And then when you started praying, we had like all of a sudden this torrential downpour that just came down. And then I was like, praying, angels, please protect us, because when you're in a camper, you do feel a little bit vulnerable.
Right? I can imagine that you
We're
do.
like, are we going to be like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz?
That's awesome.
You're anchored.
Yeah.
You're anchored in the cross.
Yes, you are.
Yes.
So, is Barry still there? You don't have to move. But
I think he went outside to double check the generator because
That's
we're boondocking on someone's property right now. So,
awesome. Okay, well, we're going to sign off with Katrina.
Okay.
She also shares the name with the hurricane.
Yes.
She has that going for her, which, also tells a lot about her personality. She's very hurricane-like. So, Katrina, you guys are amazing. I'm so proud of you and what you're doing. And Barry, before we even got on the program, he was like, this is really all Katrina.
I can feel it. She's life coaching him into his dream at this moment.
Into his calling, I think. She's like, we always impersonate both Katrina and her mother and her older sister, April, because they all kind of talk like this.
So
she's been coaching him into this. Like, you've put 30 years into this, and it's time that it comes to fruition.
Yes.
So
you know
cute.
what? We're helping each other as always, so this is our little picture here,
I want you to come on the show and tell your testimony when you're ready. The testimony of
what?
Uncle Barry that because we're involved in that testimony, which makes it feel even more real.
Yeah.
Just your life is a living miracle.
Your life is a living miracle.
There's so many chapters to it. It's a book in and of itself. I will say we do have a YouTube channel that when we started this journey, we were going to kind of follow our journey too and share our story. And we did get like 7 episodes up that are pretty good.
And what's
on
it called?
Facebook. I mean, on YouTube. It's called Barry and Katrina. We just kept it really simple. But then we kind of pooped out on it about 2 or 3 months ago trying to keep up with it.
Yeah, that's hard. I know.
We probably need, because we both have our things going and it was like hard to keep up on it. But I feel like we probably still need to come back to it. But we did get some good foundational episodes. So if people want to hear our story,
I'm going to link to that too. So everything's going to be linked on the episode for today on resistancechicks.com. And that is so exciting.
You guys want to hear Operation Freedom 1, Operation for the Hardest Years. You guys are telling your story.
That's amazing.
You guys need to
it's very raw. It's very raw.
I love it. I can't wait to watch it.
So like the vision that we kind of had for it, or we did have for it, was that we were not only sharing like what we're doing and what transpired to get us where we are right now, like this whole journey that's got us, living in a camper and selling, our house and all of our stuff and all the things, but also then looking back and sharing kind of where we've come from, how this all began. And so we do get really, and I think that probably wore us out too emotionally, because you can't just jump in and just, it's some of it's pretty heavy stuff. And as we were sharing, it's like you're reliving it.
Yeah.
And there was a little bit of, I think we just kind of like, well, maybe we'll come back to this.
That's awesome. You guys are so amazing. I'm so proud of you. I'm going to link to everything on today's show. And Katrina, I'm glad that you popped on. Guys, please go and follow Uncle Barry and Aunt Katrina, Aunt Tinkerbell. There he is. Standard Plus History, which is sphistory.com. Katrina and Barry on YouTube. Is it Barry L. Jones on YouTube? Barry, or is it just Barry Jones on YouTube? Or you can just search Standard Plus History.
Everything for Barry is sphistory.com.
No, all of my
sorry.
The YouTube is Barry L. Jones. I just saw it.
Yeah, it's Barry L. Jones, and you can find everything on it's everything I have labeled under Standards Plus History Academy.
Okay,
so if you're on Spotify, if you're on YouTube,
it's all the same name.
If you're on Patreon, if you're on Substack, if you're on X,
that's awesome.
It's all Standards Plus History Academy.
Yeah, that makes it easy. It
does. And if they go to his website, he has all the links there too, so that makes
under
it
the resources
easier.
tab.
Yeah,
I'm guessing. Or yes, there we go. Books, podcasts, blog. That's awesome. So I'm guessing your Substack is there too. So Barry, this has been awesome. Katrina, this has been awesome. I'm glad that you popped on. Guys, please go and follow. We have a lot of people that are homeschoolers that follow us. So I want you guys to go to sphistory.com and also to follow you guys. You're doing, Barry, you said you guys are doing videos live like almost every single day, which is so huge. So people can come and join you. And you guys are a wealth of knowledge and so much encouragement and just a bundle of joy. I'm proud to know you. So guys, remember, it's not just a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. And today, in the past couple days, we've discovered that the conspiracy theorists, like Uncle Barry and ourselves, were right. So when Leah's got the 9/11, when the 9/11 files drop too, we'll all be proven right about that as well. Airplanes don't crumble buildings, not like that. So they don't cause metal, steel of that magnitude to melt. So this is in the vein. It's a great time to be an American for these files to come forth, and it's a great honor to know the Jones family. You guys are amazing. Please go and get the Treasonous Cabal. I don't like to read big, long books quite like this, and I couldn't put it down. I absolutely
I think I read it in
loved
a few days.
Yeah, I just went right.
Tell them, Michelle, it has lots of pictures.
It does, though. No, it's legit. I just open up one page and there's tons of pictures.
And it actually helps you tell the story.
I can't tell them that because then it diminishes the fact that I read a big fat book.
Oh,
Barry.
It's also large print.
This guy's killing me. He's killing me here. This This is literally what it's like when we get together.
It is large print with great pictures, and the pictures actually help you tell the story like no other book.
They do. They absolutely do. You'll be able to get through it. Don't be intimidated by the bigness of the book, even though I'm telling you, I read a big book. Okay?
I have to say, you are so right about the pictures, and he has a real gift with that, because all of his lives that he does and recordings he does, he has gorgeous PowerPoints.
Graphics. Yeah, that's awesome.
And graphics. And the whole time he's teaching, he is very good about having that visual going on.
You need it.
It's really, really good. He spends hours on those. Yeah.
Which we all need it. So it's amazing. There's so much there, and the references that you've got on all of these, like your sources and stuff. It's just amazing what you've done.
Mm-hmm.
It's a phenomenal piece of work. So, all right, guys.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank
we'll see you guys next time right here on ResistanceChicks.com. See, Katrina did the blowing of the kiss too, just like I do. All right, bye, guys.
Okay. Ready?